It was the sands that first rose. The sandstorm, birthed by violent winds, plunged into unsettling calm. Then, bare moments after the wall was struck, the storm surged again. But this time it was something twisted and malevolent. The sands churned as if alive, radiating crimson light in their depths while their surface darkened, writhing and convulsing like molecules of existence, tearing themselves apart and fusing back together in a single breath. It was pure, visible embodiment of madness, sickening to watch as it clawed into the sky and tumbled toward the forest. A bestial sandstorm that towered across the world, piercing the clouds and blackening them. As the twisted sandstorm surged forward, the wall followed. The madness spread across the vast wall of Lewengard at lightning speed. Then the wall stood up. Literally. It tore itself from the ground, hardened bricks corroding into something obsidian and menacing, multiplying and dropping to the ground like drool from a monstrous entity. A knight was standing near the wall. He was the last of those positioned to evacuate the people living close to it. He wasn't aware of what had struck the wall. All he knew was that a massive shudder had run across the entire land and made him fall. As he tried to stand, the wall began to rise too, pulling itself from its foundation and dripping black viscous liquid that looked like corroded metal. As the liquid dropped, it moved with terrifying speed. The knight's brows, embedded in his helmet, furrowed. He spun and tried to run, but the viscous liquid shot skyward and landed on him, instantly sinking into his armor. He stopped mid-run and screamed in agony, his widened eyes turning black as crimson light blazed from within. His skin turned obsidian, his height swelled, and he instantly transformed into a towering, grotesque monster wielding a long, twisted sword of steel and black flesh, along with an oversized shield. The creature instantly leaped, covering tremendous distance in that single bound. It landed on a building's roof, crushing it to rubble. Knights nearby instantly began to regroup, barking commands as they unsheathed their swords and engaged the monster. But they were hurled back like broken dolls. Meanwhile, more of the moving obsidian viscous things crawled across the ground, spreading into the distance in vast amounts. The wall itself lumbered forward, making people widen their eyes in horror. The Tower Master and Knight Commander, who were near the Hall of Trials where the Emperor had locked himself for months since his last appearance, stared from where they stood with terror etched on their faces. The shadow of the wall fell across the entire land as it grew higher, slowly stretching across the sky to encompass them all. Northern's mind collapsed once again as he was struck by the origin. The damned bastard had tried to hit him directly with madness this time. But Northern had long since developed resistance to that. His mind blacked out for a moment. In that instant, Northern felt his brain cells surge at terrible speed, attacking that single spawn of madness. But it wasn't just his brain cells, it was omniform. Apparently, his body had continued growing. No, to be more accurate, omniform was still spreading across his entire body. It was taking time, slow but progressive. Northern felt a throbbing headache as he opened his eyes. He barely cracked them open when cryos descended upon him. It was fast. He lost sight of the origin for a moment and felt as though he'd been struck by a mountain. He crashed into the ground, sending forth a shockwave that razed the entire forest in a single instant. Much worse, the black and crimson ominous storm surged toward him with a hollow cry. But a winged man suddenly appeared in front of the storm. Northern barely identified the Chaos Prince and allowed himself to look away from that approaching assault. However, cryos dropped to the ground with tremendous force and slowly walked toward him. You fragile creatures drape yourselves in virtue, yet your every breath reeks of self-interest. You raise monuments not to honor the skies, but to echo your own names through time. You clothe greed as ambition, cowardice as faith, and vanity as love. Even your prayers are bargains. Pleas wrapped in demands, offerings meant only to purchase favor. You swarm across realms like parasites, devouring, claiming, hoarding. Then you dare call yourselves righteous. Tell me, when have you ever sought goodness for its own sake? You worship nothing but the hollow idol of yourselves, then wonder why the divine regards you with contempt. Northern slowly rose from the stone rubble, pushing a large slab away with ease, yet it flew meters. He chuckled even as he staggered. Hey pal, all that thunder and brimstone. What is this, a vendetta against mankind? Bit cliché, don't you think? Northern straightened, blood dripping from his temple and forehead, slowly trickling over his eyes. But so far he hadn't received any fatal wounds. Strangely enough, he felt quite energetic. He still had that slight throbbing headache as his brain cells fought the madness Cryos had attacked him with. Cliché? Insolent insect, you dare call the voice of eternity cliché? You split my flesh and think it makes us equals? You mistake a wound for weakness. All you've done is prove the depth of your arrogance. Know this, every drop of my blood is worth more than the sum of your entire kind, and I will make you choke on the blasphemy of drawing it. Northern laughed. Wow, that really struck a nerve, huh? His words were cut short as Cryos vanished at staggering speed. Northern followed suit, vanishing and flashing across the raised forest toward the twisted storm the Chaos Prince was currently fighting. He laughed and screamed at Cryos as he soared through the air. You bleed once, and suddenly your legs don't carry you like they used to. What's wrong, Origin, out of breath? Come on. I've had mortals chase me faster than this. Cryos responded with a demented laughter that echoed from across all corners. Out of breath? My breath births tempests of delirium. You think this is my limit? I will grind your bones until even memory refuses you. Raven, Ellie, Thalen, Linus, and Jeskai had been spared from the tremendous force of Northern and Cryos' battle, but only because the two titans had hurled themselves in the opposite direction, razing the forest instead. The survivors couldn't help but heave intense sighs of relief before crumpling to the ground. Even Eli released his essence manifestation and returned to human form. Apparently, they had all been suffering beneath an imperceptible pressure, the crushing weight of fear. Fear of dying so insignificantly. Fear of realizing this battle was far beyond anything they could have bargained for. In Raven's arms lay Terrence. The woman was wounded across her body and face, her armor torn in several places by vicious blows. Thalen studied Raven as she knelt with Terrence's head cradled gently on her thighs. He spoke hesitantly. Do you mind if I help? Raven's head snapped up. Please. Thalen nodded and bent before her. He summoned a pouch and withdrew a vial containing crimson liquid. Raven arched a brow as she observed the vial. Seeing her curiosity, Thalen explained. This just started circulating in the markets recently. It's a healing potion, supposedly capable of mending even the gravest wounds. Raven studied it doubtfully but didn't stop him. You can either drink it or pour it directly on the wound. Drinking works better for internal damage. He poured the potion over Terrence's wounds. To Raven's shock, the moment the liquid touched her injuries, they began sealing themselves. The healing was so swift and thorough that her eyes widened in amazement. She looked at Thalen, then at the empty vial, her face contorting with guilt. That must have been precious to you. I'm sorry you had to. Thalen cut her off. Don't apologize. This battle belongs to all of us. Northern stands at the forefront, but the rest of us shouldn't hesitate to contribute however we can. Respect flickered in Raven's eyes as she nodded. Terrence stirred, instantly commanding her attention. Terrence! The woman stirred again, her face straining as though in pain. Then her eyes flew open. Raven frowned. Terrence's eyes were missing pupils and glowing with subtle light. She lifted herself with impossible grace, as though the winds themselves carried her. She looked at Raven in silence. The air hung motionless. Everyone held their breath. Then she turned to Thalen, who stared back with a slight frown creasing his features. She sighed, and when she spoke, her voice emerged as many voices woven into one. The Elven One speaks truth. This battle belongs to every single one of us. I see no reason why a child should shoulder it alone. So I need all your help in creating a perfect vessel that will allow me to face that man on equal terms. Thalen's frown deepened with suppressed hostility. The fact that she instantly recognized his elven heritage, combined with her otherworldly manner of speaking, confirmed his suspicions. Raven's face darkened. She glared directly into Terrence's luminous eyes. You're Ul. Terrence gazed down at her. Correct, child. Instantly, everyone except Raven and Thalen dropped to their knees and bowed their heads. Ul, guardian, mother, creator of this world's inhabitants. Her presence was the world itself, pure gold made manifest. Their hearts leaped with the knowledge that this battle truly mattered. Eli was overwhelmed with wonder. He longed to glimpse her eyes but found himself crushed by such profound awe that he couldn't lift his gaze. His body felt cold and pressed down by invisible weight. He was a paragon, yet he trembled with fear and reverence, not from any hostile intent, but from pure, instinctive worship. He was Ul's servant, after all. Every drifter was. Terrence's gaze settled on Thalen. His reaction is understandable. He doesn't belong to this world. She shifted her attention to Raven. But what grudge do you harbor against me, child? Raven's eyes blazed with fury. You were the one who took her. Ul tilted her head slightly, then realized a moment later and pointed to herself. You refer to this vessel. Raven's glare never wavered. Ul laughed lightly. I took no one, child. I simply called, and being a faithful servant, she answered. Never did I expect matters would escalate this early. I had hoped to contain this before it reached such heights. I'm baffled by how humans like you manage to uncover such secrets. Ul drew a breath. This is far beyond any of you. To defeat an origin, one must at least reach Zenith status. Even then, the best a Zenith can achieve is fighting on equal ground with an origin who has been sealed for 7,000 years and is weaker than the average origin. She gazed down at them all. The only reason you still draw breath is because that man has been incredibly weakened by spending 7 millennia in the thin layers of peace. He is calmer now, well-spoken and sensible because of it. However, it's only a matter of time before he remembers how to rage, how to lose himself in fury, before he recalls who he truly was. That man, consumed by anger, his authority will surge and he will slowly grow, returning to his prime. Before that happens, I must seal him away again. And I need a stronger vessel to accomplish this. She surveyed them all. The cores of your souls can be combined to strengthen this one. This will allow me to draw out more of my authority and forge a far more durable body. In that instant, Raven's expression twisted into something dark and terrible. What? Even Thalen's face changed. Simply put, what Ul was proposing was harvesting all their cores to strengthen the body she inhabited, allowing her to channel more authority. They needed to die? How could any guardian suggest such a thing? In that moment, Raven laughed, a sound that made both Thalen and Ul turn to stare. As her laughter slowly died away, she fixed Ul with a look of pure venom. Must be really convenient for you. Whatever you are. She repeated Ul's words in a mocking tone. The cores of your souls can be combined to strengthen this one. This will allow me to draw out more of my authority and create a much more durable body. Crawl back to whatever pit you slithered out from. You bitch. It was not Ul who first expressed shock. Nor was it Eli or Linus and Jessi who felt a subtle compulsion to pay obeisance to the supposed supremacy of their world. It was Thalen who turned to Raven first, jaw-dropping. Then Jessi stifled her surprise. Linus frowned, followed by Eli, before Ul lifted her chin slightly. What vile words you speak. I understand them not, yet I sense the venom they drip with. She lowered her head and smiled somberly, gesturing toward herself. This vessel brims with warmth for you. Is that why you tremble with such fury? She shook her head. You are wrong, child. Everything that pulses with soul essence serves a purpose. I am the guide of that purpose, the light that illuminates your path. To rebel against me is to choose darkness. She paused. The silence stretched, heavy. I recall an awful memory of one who once rebelled. The beginning of my mistakes. Unfortunately, he met the worst fate at my hands. Child, do not embrace the darkness. Do not surrender to it. Accept the light I offer you. I sense discord, evil in your heart. She paused again, tilting her head as she studied Raven. What a strange creature you are. Are you even human? She regarded Raven with delight slowly blooming across her face. It is incredibly rare for a phenomenon like you to manifest. You are a defect, but a fascinating one. She smiled pleasantly. Your core is malnourished. You have been tampered with since you dwelt in your mother's womb. Or was it an attempt to destroy you perhaps? By your mother herself? Whatever was done to make you defective indeed succeeded. Her smile widened. The mistake is thinking defects must be weaker. It is an error that perfect beings often make. A mistake even I made recently. Her expression darkened with displeasure as she spoke those final words. Raven absorbed what Elle said. The words almost mattered, because she had simply laid bare the story of her childhood in a single breath. But something else mattered more. Northern was out there fighting for the fate of their continent, possibly the world. Everyone had to contribute by any means necessary, just as Thalen had said. Raven was not confident she could defeat Ul. For a long time, she had suspected Ul herself might be an origin. Of course, it was a baseless assumption, especially since no one knew if origins were presently alive or merely legends from another realm. However, after the Dark Continent event, her suspicions had crystallized. Right now, as she stood here, she was more certain than ever that Ul was an origin. This made things perilous for her. Could she defeat an origin? Northern was currently struggling against one. She wasn't even sure she could last a second. But she would not back down. Raven clenched her teeth and opened her hands. Materializing a sword, she gripped forward in a two-handed stance. Get out of my friend. Ul raised her chin and chuckled pitifully, looking down at Raven. She slowly extended her hand. What will you do with that trash? Cut me? You forget. Any hurt you inflict on this body will remain with it. Thalen frowned, observing both Raven and Ul from the sidelines. Raven gritted her teeth, silently wrestling with that barrier. She couldn't bring herself to attack Ul, because that was truly Terrence's body. She also knew she had to decide, or a far greater loss would occur. Her eyes sharpened dangerously, and a cold, murderous aura erupted from her with such intensity that Ul herself flinched. She had flinched before catching herself, slightly stunned. What? Did I nearly fear her? That child. The very notion made Ul's body crawl with disgust and hatred. Her expression shattered into one of utter revulsion, ugly to behold from a supposed being of higher existence. Ah! Now I am enraged. She glared at those kneeling before her. Slay yourselves in service to me this instant, if you care for your loved ones. At those words, Eli's eyes widened. He trembled, his face draining of color. Then he looked at his hand. Thalen watched first, curious. Is he really? Eli's hand whipped toward his chest with razor speed, but Thalen had moved, catching his wrist just before the hand could plunge deeper. The man's fingertips, now shaped like talons, had already pierced the first layer of skin but hadn't penetrated further. In the same breath, Raven had moved with blurred speed and used her sword to deflect Linus's silver wings as he drove their sharp edges toward his chest. She spun frantically toward Jeskai but stopped mid-stride as she saw the young woman wearing a wide, demented grin, trembling as she held her hand, the one that itched madly to drive the spear into her chest. Jeskai drooled as she began clawing at her right hand with her fingers, trying to wound herself while mumbling like a crazed soul. Only he can command me, only he can command me, only he can command me. For a moment, Raven shuddered as if something cold had bitten her. Her lips parted slightly. What the? But immediately she turned to Ul, who blazed with even greater fury. You reckless humans! Do you have any idea what your transgressions mean? This is treachery. You dare oppose me when I harbor nothing but pure intentions toward you all. She lunged forward, hands extended as she reached for Linus. Raven surged forward as well, hurling her sword upward from behind with both hands. However, Ul suddenly halted mid-movement. The pause gave Raven the time she needed. Her gaze sharpened and she swung the sword upward toward Terrence's neck, resolved to cleanly sever her head. But her blade froze mere inches from the neck, and her eyes widened. One of Terrence's eyes was strained, streaming with tears, and her hand trembled. Raven trembled slightly as she realized her friend was also fighting from within. She instantly felt a searing ache pierce her heart. She had resolved earlier that she must do what needed to be done. It was the only thing she knew how to do: help people execute what they deemed most difficult. But today it was especially torturous and contradictory, because even though her mind, sharp as a blade, knew what to cut, her heart felt leaden and reluctant. She had suppressed her heart. But just now, she realized she had never even granted her friend the benefit of doubt, trust, that maybe she too would be able to fight. At that moment, Ul grinned and fixed her glare on Raven. "Kill yourself this instant." Raven's widened eyes trembled as she turned the edge of her sword, bringing it to her throat. Raven wrestled with herself for a moment, the blade in her hand trembling. Her eyes were dark and hollow, something reminiscent of the same ruthless, precise, and lethal Raven from the Dark Continent. But in just 3 months, Raven had changed from that person. More so in the past few days spent with Northern, she had grown to find someone she couldn't defeat, someone she couldn't reform, someone far stronger than that. And Raven, in all honesty, was happy with that. She felt truly at peace with herself. Perhaps that was why she hesitated. Even though the Origin had exploited the self-doubt in her heart to issue a command she must follow, and Raven was bound to that command, she still hesitated somehow. Terrence, struggling from behind, saw this and winced painfully. Her resistance surged, and Ul's hand refused to move an inch forward. The Origin snarled, "You vermin! What are you doing? Submit yourself this instant." "No, I will not let you kill my friends. I don't care if you can strip away my will, crush my body, do anything you want because I am a priestess for your purpose, but you will not touch my friends. I will revolt." It was strange. Same voice, same mouth, same person arguing with herself. But the voice was different, and in that moment, it jolted Raven awake. She drove the blade into the ground, quickly touching her neck to wipe away a line of blood. Raven stared down, horrified. "I was completely out of it for a moment. And then, the voice that speaks whenever I slay monsters or advance in soul rank commanded me to." Raven raised her eyes, realization dawning. Ul still trembled, unable to move because Terrence resisted her with an iron will. Raven suddenly understood. "We must do something to—" "How dare you?" Raven's eyes widened. She threw herself aside as Jeskai, with her scream and her spear, descended like a hurricane. Her spear whirled through the air, transforming into several strikes embedded in one. But Linus intercepted, extending his wing and driving it into the ground to block the attack, shielding himself and Ul. Jeskai landed and spun her spear, resting it on her shoulder and fixing Linus with a grim stare. "What are you doing? Are you a fool? If you attack her, you'll destroy the human." Jeskai tilted her head, that same grimness intact. "Do I look like I care?" Linus frowned. "You might not, but he does. They are part of the reason he's fighting so hard now. If you kill her, do you think you'll get a well done from him? Or will you simply fall from his grace?" Jeskai looked down for a moment, muttering slowly, "I do not wish to fall from grace." Linus sighed, then glanced back at Ul. "Then we have to separate Ul from the woman. At least that would guarantee her safety." Jeskai looked at Linus, then at Ul behind him. She drove her spear into the ground, leaving it standing. Meanwhile, Thalen, who was holding Eli in place, looked at him, hoping the Paragon had also snapped out of it. Eli had been still since he'd restrained him, no movement whatsoever, but somehow he was having a bad premonition. Raven looked around. The landscape was barren, night had fallen, and the winds were growing colder. As a Paragon, she held a degree of resistance to the cold. But she had seen how savage the weather conditions of the Dark Continent could be. Moreover, in the next few hours it would be the last day of the year. She hadn't expected to spend the year's end warding off invaders. It was an unfortunate event, for them all and for this world. But things seemed to have progressed. Everyone had regained a sense of self. All they needed to do was knock Terrence unconscious so they could focus less on her and find a way to help Northern. The constant rumbling from afar and the subtle trembling of the land made her uneasy and worried about Northern. What position am I in to be worrying about him? Northern didn't need her useless worry right now. What he needed was whatever contribution she could make. She straightened and yanked her sword from the ground, fixing Terrence with a stern look. We have to knock her out. Linus and Jessi turned to the priestess, Raven's words cutting through the chaos. Meanwhile, Ul, still wrestling with Terrence's iron will, began to sweat from one side of her face. She was visibly panicking. The humans she faced, especially the black-haired girl, were unusual. Then there was the lady with short hair and dark eyes. She looked unhinged. Ul was confused as to why her command wasn't working on those two. What made them so special? Her voice, the guidance drifters had heard since the day they awakened, had become ingrained in their thoughts. She doubted anyone in this cubicle of a world could disobey her, because her voice had become their thoughts. What she commanded felt like their own convictions. She could guess why the black-haired girl resisted. Aside from being a defect, the priestess's resistance seemed to be stirring something emotional. Humans were irritating. They responded fiercely to sentimentalism and emotions. Ul could never understand it, but she wouldn't underestimate it. She wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Then there was the elf. She clicked her teeth in annoyance, realizing this was the worst combination of people she could encounter. She despised struggling this much against humans who were like parasitic bugs. Her younger brother would be laughing if he could see her now. That scornful Eki. I need to turn the tides. Ul turned her head and saw Thalen still restraining Eli. Then she realized something. That one is a paragon. He's the only normal one of them all. The closer you are to the peak, the harder it is to resist my voice. This girl leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Despite being a paragon, she resisted. But this one is normal. If I focus on him alone, it should be possible. Ul whirled back. Child, sacrifice yourself, save your world. Give me your core. Thalen trembled as he felt fierce resistance from Eli. He glared at Ul. You are a shameless woman. You are the vermin among us all. He shouted before Eli slammed his legs into the ground, generating a shockwave that sent Thalen hurtling through the air. Eli drove his sharp talons toward his belly, but before they could pierce, his forearm went flying into the air, Raven appearing before him. His eyes darkened with fury, a rod materializing in his hand. When did he? Raven had no time to recover when the rod slammed down. She redirected her sword and blocked the strike. But the ground suffered. A shockwave erupted outward, webbed cracks shattering the stones instantly. Eli's amber eyes blazed with cold malice as he whirled the black rod through the air, bringing it down on her again immediately. Raven's eyes widened with shock. Even though she had cleanly sliced Eli's hand off, the paragon paid no regard to it. He blocked her strike instantly. Not just that, his movement was fast, too fast. She hadn't expected him to twist his hand in midair without proper stance and bring the strange rod down a second time. Raven wondered in that moment, should I use my ability? But she immediately decided against it. She didn't want to kill the paragon or drag this into a drawn-out battle. She was out of options as the rod came down. She would have to take the blow. However, a surge of wind rushed toward her, strange and different, with a thick green flow. Thalen. The tide of wind struck Eli's flank like a pillar and sent him reeling through the air. The green wind twirled and scattered, revealing Thalen, whose hands spun as he descended slowly to the ground. His body had changed. He'd grown taller. His hair flowed down in green waves, with pointed ears and emerald eyes that shone with ethereal grace. I'll stop him from killing himself. Lady Raven, you find a way to knock Ul out. Raven looked at the elf strangely and nodded. All right, thank you. She turned to Ul, but suddenly something strange happened. The space shrank. Everything distorted in a way she didn't understand. She was closer to Thalen, who had just run toward Eli, But now Thalen was running toward her, with Jeskai and Linus close to where she thought she'd been. For a brief second, she caught no glimpse of Ul and Eli, especially Ul, who had been to their right with Jeskai and Eli, but now was nowhere to be found. They all froze, stopping and looking around, noticing how the space had collapsed and their locations had been switched without them knowing how or when. Drip, drip. Right in front of Raven, crimson liquid began to fall drop by drop. She frowned, her face paling as she lifted her gaze. In the sky were Ul and Eli. Her hand was buried in the Paragon's bowels, punching out from behind, drenched in his blood. Her mouth opened in shock, her throat going dry at what she saw. Linus and Jeskai raised their heads, shocked, horrified by the sight. Ul was preached and treated as the ego of the world. She was Trael, and Trael was her. She was the voice the world itself grew in order to save them. In other words, she was the force of awakening talent, the quencher of the early calamities. Somewhere in their hearts, they developed a conclusion that Ul was benevolent, kind, the queen of mankind who had humanity's best interests at heart. A soul guardian created for mankind's protection, the axis of goodness and humanity itself. However, in this instant that illusion came undone. They were realizing it was all lies. They had no idea where the lie had started, but the truth was undeniable. This was the macabre face of the one they deemed guardian of their world, Trael's supposed voice, and it terrified them. Ul looked at Eli with a cold, indifferent expression. Her form, Terrence's form, was changing. Terrence's white hair fell longer, reaching beyond her feet. Her eyes grew sharper with a golden glow radiating from them. Her skin paled, and golden markings began to flow across it as her armor reformed, streaming and solidifying over her body with insane speed. When the transformation finished, she looked like a warrior dropped from the bowels of divinity itself. Exceptionally beautiful, her eyes radiating cold, calculated ferocity. She withdrew her hand from Eli's stomach, and the Paragon, with a hole in his chest, fell toward the ground. Thalen's green wind swept across the landscape in a second, and he was there to catch the Paragon just before his dying body could touch the ground. Thalen stared at Eli with quiet despair. They didn't know each other for long, but the little time they'd spent together was enough for him to feel honest pain for the dying man. He was in agony. Eli was trying to say something, his face pale, his mouth and eyes trembling. He tried to force the words out, but it was too much. Eventually his mouth fell slack and his eyes turned glassy as his breath ceased. Thalen felt the pain deepen as he watched Eli die in his hands without being able to do anything about it. Even if he'd tried to heal him, it wouldn't have been possible. Eli wasn't just injured. All the vitality of his soul had been sucked away. He was a hollow shell. Thalen had no idea how anyone could live without a soul core, so death was the better option. Still, it hurt, unbearably. He laid Eli's corpse down gently and slowly stood, looking at Ul with an intensely furious expression. His green eyes blazed, and his hair whipped wildly as the air around him grew hot and heavy. Damn it! I haven't been this angry in a long time. Raven observed Thalen, then stood herself. Her gaze was dark and cold. Her hair changed, one half became white while the other remained black. One eye was black and the other white, making her look like a strange, anomalous existence. Me too, you wretched bitch. You're going down today. Jeskai and Linus were equally furious. Linus's glassy wings expanded and began spreading over his body, while Jeskai spun her sword and got into stance. Her voice rang out with demented glee, a grin playing across her face. Looks like it's been decided then. We're slaying our evil guardian. Ul looked down on all of them with utter disgust. You think I have a shred of muscle in my pristine body willing to bother with you vermin? She looked forward and blasted off like an arrow released from a bow. However, the unexpected happened. Pillars of green wind plunged into the air in quick succession, chasing her as she fled. They exploded from beneath the ground like volcanic eruptions and continued surging forward. Ul glanced back in slight worry and increased her speed, flying even faster. Suddenly there was another figure chasing her far behind. One wing was white, the other black, and both extended over a vast, impossible distance. One flap alone generated a wind vortex that could send roofs flying from wooden houses. Both of them chased her with insane ferocity burning not just in their eyes but in every desperate attempt they made to close the distance. Raven's wings spread wide as she tore across the distance with explosive speed. Ull's expression strained as she lunged with even greater velocity. The spiraling pillars of green wind twirled down with immense force to crush her beneath their weight. But Ull spun away to the side. Another pillar surged from the flank, rolling with the mighty force of a tornado. In the same breath, Ull ceased to exist in its path. She simply vanished from space and was already ahead again. She frowned with irritation, then sighed. Vile mortals! Raven and Thalen gave chase, Thalen rolling forward with his pillars of wind while Raven flew. However, the next moment both of them were trapped in space. Raven exploded with incredible speed. She felt herself moving, but when she looked down, she wasn't leaving that area of space. It was still the same patch of ground beneath her. She glanced forward to Thalen's great winds and realized after some moments that it was the same. The winds rolled with potent fury but weren't visibly moving forward. It was just like last time, when she'd suddenly found herself somewhere else while trying to stop the Paragon. Raven narrowed her eyes. Ull's authority is over space. Knowing was one thing, but how that knowledge could help their situation, Raven wasn't sure anything she did would work. And Origin's authority was no fish cake. They were basically writing the laws of that reality. It was as stalwart as trying to break through the laws of any reality. For a Paragon, that was impossible. Raven gritted her teeth and refused to give up. Meanwhile, Ull drew ever closer to Northern, Chaos Prince, and Cryos, who were caught up in a ferocious battle. On Luengard's seaport, a strange ship carved of concrete lay at the water's edge, and on its towering structure stood a man in flowing garb, white hair dancing along the current of the wind. His radiant blue eyes were forlorn, and it seemed tears had dried on his face. He looked at the towering, grotesque structure that spanned over the Empire, wreaking devastating havoc, and at the white-haired man who flew around it with fire in his legs alongside two others, trying to defeat the thing. He didn't look willing to help. His eyes were too sad to think about something like that. Byran looked at his hands as a gush of memory that had flooded into his head a while ago refused to leave and continued to haunt him. He was reminded of his failures, and every bit of his body, joints, muscles, ached from it. He just stood on the top floor of the tower, looking at the dark skies, the flames alight across different areas of the Empire. The screams and cries of people were distant to his ears. A moment later, he looked down at the tower. He could feel the smashing on its door. Not that the smashing was powerful, it was that of fragile hands. It was just that Byron's senses were extraordinary, and he paid extra attention to the owner of those fragile hands. In barely a second, the scenery around him changed. He was at the first floor of the tower, right behind the white-haired woman who was desperately smacking her hands on the large door. "Young lady, you'll break your hands." The lady whirled her head back. "You! What is this? You abducted me and placed me in this place without any information. Who are you? Did Regal send you?" Byran looked at her with a delightful smile. "You are a spitting image of him." The woman frowned. "Him who?" "My lord." The lady's frown darkened viciously. "Who is your lord?" Byran answered blankly, his hands behind his back. "Your son." At that moment Hinai froze, looking at Byran. Her voice trembled. He's back." Byran smiled subtly and nodded. "Indeed he is. He has come to put an end to the calamity that threatens to destroy his home. And I have committed myself and commanded the others to protect the ones most precious to him." Hinai's shoulders trembled slightly. She was so greatly relieved that she bent to her knee and sighed. "Ah, why didn't you say anything earlier? You can't just kidnap a person and expect them to understand your intentions. You know?" Byran looked at her. "I needed to act swiftly because I didn't want to kill anyone without my lord's consent. Lady Hinai looked at Byran with a slightly withdrawn expression, then sighed again. About this calamity that my son is fighting, do you mind telling more? Isn't it dangerous for art? Byran looked at the woman and suddenly laughed. Dangerous? My lord? Ha ha ha. You are a great jester. He calmed, smiling handsomely. Well, everything should be coming to an end soon. Come sit. I shall entertain you with a great story. Hinai looked at Byran strangely. How could he be so laid back when he claimed there was a calamity outside? Was it a lie? Or was he just that faithful in her son? Anyways, she decided to do the same. Place mountainous faith in her son, though not so much as to burden him, and she followed Byran. Hey, mister, kindly tell me your name. Northern was in a tight lock within Cryos's grip, with the Origin restructuring his face with brutal blows. He punched his face several times, blood exploded out. He punched with his fist, his elbow, and even smashed his head against Northern's. But the direct hits weren't the only thing he was suffering from. Every one of Cryos's attacks was imbued with a vast amount of madness that slithered into his blood and continued to rage in him. Because it couldn't drive him mad. It slowed his movement, his perception, and even dulled his sight terribly so that all Northern could see was a blur. It was as though the Origin was controlling every flow of his blood to destroy him from within. It made him remember that Cryos was also an origin of blood. But against the internal turmoil he was fighting, and against the external devastation, he was also holding his ground, his vessel refusing to shatter. Cryos groaned in anger as he clenched Northern's face and drove it into the ground. They landed in the center of the vast desert between the Luengard Empire and the devastated forest. Enormous webbed cracks spread in an instant, exploding a powerful shockwave that rattled through several distances. He continued to smash Northern's head into the ground with his feet, hammering him down with a loud and aggravating groan. D. Worthless human. D. The speed of his legs increased and the shockwaves exploded more frequently. The cracks on the ground deepened, breaking lower and lower into a crater. The speed increased so much that the sound was like that of a thunderous drum beating 100 times in 1 second. Dust exploded across the whole desert and everything was covered in a fog of it. Cryos looked down. His calm countenance was also shattered. Even though handsome, he now looked like a demented patient, grinning with a glow of insanity in his thinned eyeballs. He finally stopped smashing his leg after he felt no response beneath. His grin widened. Finally, rot in misery. That is what a worthless human gets for daring to make me bleed. As he removed his leg and stepped back, he suddenly heard an eerie chuckle. Then he stopped in his tracks and slowly turned back, his face frozen in wide-eyed disbelief. Where do you think you're heading to? You clod of wayward marl. Northern stood with a dislocated jaw, blood streaming from his shattered mouth. One eyeball dangled from its socket. The other was drowning in crimson. His pristine white hair was slick with blood. And yet he was standing. Northern himself didn't know why. He was drowning in pain, an insane level of agony. So much that he should be screaming. But moving his mouth even that little had hurt like hell. So he couldn't even cry out. His bones were mangled, twisted into grotesque shapes. Horrifying when he thought about it. He'd fought countless monsters to date. None had managed to land a hit thanks to Void Force, but still, Northern knew his body was strong. Strong enough that no strike should have bent his bones into this pitiful state. Cryos's raw strength was terrifying. It made Northern want to walk away from all of this. The pain was so intense he wanted to just collapse somewhere and die peacefully, because the thought of healing, of enduring that agony, was even more terrifying. Every inch of his body screamed with hypersensitivity. Any slight touch registered as searing pain, like a kick to the groin. Yet he was standing. Actually, he wished he wasn't. But he was. And worse, he was healing. But so agonizingly slow that Northern figured he'd be better off dead. He shot a death glare at Cryos with his one working eye. I can't die without dragging this bastard down with me. Now would definitely be a good time to use that chaos. And destroy the balance of the world. Because every inch of me hurts like hell and I don't care. Northern bent slightly and limped forward. Cryos looked at him and burst out laughing. What are you going to do in that state? Spit blood on me? Northern chuckled. You mean grace you with the radiance of my blood? Tsh, you're not worthy of it. The next moment, torrents of black arrows hammered the ground with devastating force, obliterating everything. Chaos Prince landed and immediately grabbed Northern by the collar, hurling him away while shouting, "Take care, my partner. Tak." He grinned maniacally at his father and launched one blow his way. Cryos regarded his son with a cold, distant expression, the golden glow of his eyes simmering with disdain. A confident smile played at the Chaos Prince's lips. His expression was calm yet taunting. "Father, shall we pick up where we left off?" Two pairs of wide black wings erupted from his back, one pair at his upper back, another at his lower. All four curved maliciously and descended on Cryos with bullet-like speed. He bombarded the Origin with the razor-sharp edges of his void wings, spawning feathers sharper than blades and controlling them to swirl and attack Cryos from all directions. Yet the Origin was fast enough to counter them all. His movements were escalating, blocking with instantaneous speed, his hands moving as if they were already there. Every onslaught shattered and flew back, the feathers bending as his hands parried them away. Chaos Prince opened his hands. Black spears manifested in the air and pierced down toward his father, but Cryos shattered them with his fist. Anki knew his entire body was still processing the void. It would take time before he could properly control it. The smarter choice after absorbing the void would have been retreating into hiding until he'd mastered it, then emerging. But this was the only window he had to retrieve the rest of his soul from his father's gut, and he couldn't afford to miss it. Moreover, this opportunity was a bonus. He'd been keeping Northern under close watch, observing the peak of his strength so he could prepare for that moment when he'd take everything from him. The void was just the beginning. Chaos Prince recognized that Northern was unique. He had something others didn't possess. That ability to create spawns had nothing to do with the void. The void merely exposed what already lay within. Chaos Prince was certain because he had the void now and could feel the connection of every being that existed in Northern's soul. However, he couldn't bring it to life, which was why he couldn't let Northern die here. And he also couldn't lose. He had one more reason to live. Chaos Prince's eyes sharpened with resolve. This time I won't fail. From below, black spears shot upward from the ground around Cryos. But the Origin suddenly released a shockwave of crimson and obsidian cloud, destroying and shattering all the black spears that should have impaled him. The cloud began shaping into savage spears that seemed to pulse with life. And Cryos looked at his son with inhuman light blazing from his eyes, radiating supremacy. A deliberate, knowing grin cut across his face as he pointed a finger at Chaos Prince. "Is this how you do it?" The Chaos Prince, recognizing what it was, forced a lame chuckle. "Seriously?" The spears lunged at him instantly, with devastating speed that shattered the atmospheric sound barrier in an instant. He moved to wrench himself away, but the spears surrounded him. There was no escape. However, their trajectory was off. None came directly at him. The Chaos Prince grinned. "You should learn to aim properly before daring to copy my attack, old man." The Origin, with an uncharacteristic look, simply turned his fingers, and all the spears that had missed Chaos Prince stretched and twisted. The ones flying at his sides bent, and no spear should ever bend like that unless they were mad. Chaos Prince's eyes widened as he formed a cocoon of void energy around himself and solidified it. But it was flawed. The spears were too fast and had breached his perimeter before the cocoon formed. One pierced his upper arm. Another impaled his thigh, rapidly injecting madness into his blood. Inside the cocoon, Chaos Prince trembled and crumbled to his knees, eyes wide. His father strode toward him with a slight smile. "Do you actually think you can take me on like this?" Chaos Prince wore a blank expression, blood dripping from his mouth as the cocoon he'd created crumbled away. He looked at his father with cold hatred. The Origin stopped before him and gazed down with mild disdain. All of you are worms at best. You, the worthless human, all worms that I shall trample underfoot. Northern leaned against a rock, wincing in pain as the ground shook from the battle between Cryos and the Chaos Prince. He considered calling upon Byran to end this, but the idea didn't sit right with him. Northern had much to ponder after that last attempt. He didn't know the state of his summons now, and he now knew exactly who Byran was. But that wasn't the main reason. He hesitated to call upon the Sword King because this was something he had to do alone. There's no commanding respect when your summons accomplish what you cannot. There was no shame in relying on them, but not out of desperation or weakness, only necessity. Right now, his mangled state violated that necessity. It would be pitiful to summon Byran. And Northern was done being pitiful. Extinguishing chaos and void was a solid step forward. Becoming an origin was an unexpected boon, yet he was still getting beaten like never before. His eyes worked at blinding speed. Without them, matching Cryos would have been impossible. Now that I think about it, that cringy bastard doesn't even have eyes like mine, and he's still keeping up. Did that mean the Chaos Prince was fundamentally stronger? Of course. What did I expect? He's probably over 10,000 years old. Northern fell silent. Then it truly struck him, the weight of the battle he was fighting. He'd been trading blows for hours with a being millennia old. His mouth opened slightly in shock, as though he were only now grasping the depth. Wasn't that like fighting a god? And with a mortal body, no less. Northern's body was sturdier than most, but against a deity-like creature, it was still plastic, too fragile, easily broken. And Cryos had proven that. All his talents and abilities were useless. Full Impact, Frostheart, Burning Storm's talent. Everything useless. Cryos adapted to each one at an alarming rate. Nothing worked twice. Northern had gotten inventive, mixing abilities on the fly, reusing old ones. But the Origin's breaking point remained out of reach, and Northern was the one falling apart. He hated that he wasn't more imaginative. He had too many flaws to boot. A naive boy who didn't know what he was doing. Even on Earth, he'd been the same. Nothing had changed in this world. On his deathbed, he thought he'd learned a lesson. But here, he'd quickly forgotten all his mistakes and reverted to the same person. His story wasn't about a protagonist who learned from his past life and carved a greater path in the new one. Hell, he didn't even consider himself a protagonist. Just one unlucky bastard, starting from that mess with the God Nexus and that old hag, then tumbling into some ancient world. Northern chuckled dryly. What the hell? Is my life flashing before my eyes? He was healing, but slowly. Now, well-rested and alert, Northern felt his life in grave jeopardy, and his will to live was waning. He did want to live, but he felt tired. So tired. His back, his body, everything ached like mad. Even with his failing eyesight, he could still perceive his surroundings clearly. He shifted his head slightly, and a spear shattered the rock beside his neck. He couldn't even bring himself to frown. Slowly, a gentle, pristine foot in white and golden boots touched the ground. Still managing to dodge in your state. Northern looked up at the Origin, his appearance appalling to behold. Yet his voice was jovial, dripping with sarcasm. Would you prefer I sat lifelessly and waited for death? He chuckled, the sound strained. Even death would sweat trying to claim me. Nothing comes easy, after all. Besides, I haven't even fallen in love. Hell, why am I remembering that now? Only tried it once in my last one. And oh hell, it ended too quickly. That damned wife of mine never let me try again, even though I promised to last longer. She said I wasn't cut out for that side of the world. He stared at Ul with his dangling eye. Do you think so too, Ul? That I'm not cut out for it? Wait, I'm suddenly curious. Ul looked at him with utter disgust, raising her chin. You are the one I missed. Northern let out a short laugh. I'm not sure what you mean. Ul moved closer, her hips swaying. There was a coreless child who should have died. But due to his carelessness, he gained a unique attribute and more. He was marked. So I missed him. You are that child. Northern laughed again. Not sure what you're trying to tell me, but all this sounds like a compliment right now. He hesitated. You wouldn't be kind enough to compliment me, would you, Ul? Ul grimaced darkly. You think this is a joke? Northern grinned, unsettling and lingering before he replied. Come stand in my shoes and see if everything doesn't look like a joke to you. I'm just a 17-year-old boy, fighting a being over 10,000 years old, alongside his son, who's probably just as ancient. Did I mention the son was eaten by the father, then crawled into my soul and got revived thanks to some White Walker boy I hated killing but had to? Northern giggled. Sounds like a joke to me, doesn't it to you? Ul stood before him, looking down at him as if he were a detestable worm. Northern managed to raise his head just enough to meet her gaze. What? Why are you looking at me like you need to take a shit? Ul extended a hand over him. Your body is healing, but far too slowly. I can't have you dying here. You have too many answers to give me and my brothers. Such as? Ul's face contorted further into a beautiful rage. Why a god's mark lingers on your soul? Northern glanced warily at the spear's blade beside him, then returned his gaze to Ul. How can you even tell? Ul's voice dripped with dark finality as she swept her hand through the air in a star-like pattern. You will be trapped in a space where time moves quickly. It will accelerate your healing, but will also seal you from reality. You will age rapidly, and have no strength to resist interrogation once I am finished with this street thug. As she spoke, a spatial prism shimmered to life around Northern. He was frozen, speechless, staring with his one bloodied eye. The prison shifted through different angles, constructing a transparent cage from which nothing could break in or out. Ul gave him one last glance of pure disdain, then flew away. The space prison felt no different than it had a few moments ago, when he was seated alone. The ventilation seemed slightly more restricted, that was all. However, Northern soon noticed the drastic difference. He leaned his head back to nap, but mere seconds later, his dangling eye snapped back into its socket. His face smoothed over, and his mangled bones straightened with startling speed. At the slow rate his healing was working, this should have taken close to a day. Yet it was accomplished in mere seconds. The realization jolted his eyes open and he sat up, properly processing Ul's words. Is time really flowing differently here? No doubt it was. His healing felt slow, but the results were instantaneous. It had to be the space prism's doing. A slow smile spread across Northern's lips as the truth sank in. Time was accelerating for him in this space. He didn't know the exact rate, but it felt like barely a minute had passed since Ul left. She must have expended a great deal of power to create this, especially restrained by a mortal body. How is she even able to? She was dying just hours ago. Northern shook his head sharply. That's not the point. He sighed, sat up straight, crossed his legs and called upon his status. Profile. Name. Rian Artemis Riamgard, Northern Longguard. True name Frownyface unwritten. Burning Storm attributes Frownyface omniform. Evolving. Endless. Demon. Soul rank Frownyface transient. Talent fragments Frownyface 13. 985/6000. Copied talents. 6 out of 6. Owned talents. 4. Owned items. Illusioned Hefter, Moonlit Scale, and 19 others. Northern stared at his talent fragments. After his soul purge, and after the origin seed was influenced by Omniform to become endless, his talents had been drained. The one good thing about the war was the abundance of monsters for him and his summons to kill. TSK. Maybe I'll miss this? No, he wouldn't. War was hell. My entire back aches like mad. Why would I want to go through that again? He sighed and leaned back. Now all that's left is to wait for the remaining 3 months to pass. And the damn penalty should be averted. Northern wasn't sure it would happen or if it would work, if the system could be deceived by the twisted time flow of the space prism's reality Ul had constructed. It better. This is the origin of space's authority. Northern glanced at the system's interface as he waited. Now that chaos and void were gone, it felt sparse, leaving an almost wistful taste in his mouth. Ta! It happened for the best. I can fare well without them. He looked at his hands. I will carve my path with blood and fire. This time my sweat and my bones may cry out, but they will prove that what I become was not born of luck or grace, not by stumbling on a dead origin's vestige or some memory of the void. It will be purely my raw, unstoppable will. He clenched his fist and waited. The seconds or minutes or hours, Northern wasn't sure how to classify them, flew by quickly, each one making his body feel stronger, until his flesh was fully healed and his eyes regained their sharp, dangerous azure glow. His sharp white brows and white hair were pristine again, as if he had grown new ones. His skin was slightly pale but flawlessly smooth. The molten vein armor had been destroyed, so Northern wore his tattered school uniform, which made him look more like the origin of madness than Cryos ever had. The wait continued, and a thread of nervousness wound through him. He hoped this would work. He hoped he wouldn't just grow old in this place. Becoming an ascendant or possibly a paragon was just one facet of the plan. He still had to find a way to break out of the space prison. Northern sighed and closed his eyes, awaiting either his failure or his miracle. Suddenly, a mighty roar of wind filled the space. A green tornado smashed into the ground before him. Northern frowned immediately. He knew no one who wielded wind with color. The gale dispersed, and Thalen strode out, hurrying toward him and dropping to one knee. Northern, are you all right? Northern looked at the headmaster for a long moment. A smile touched his lips. You're alive. Thalen straightened, slightly stunned. What? You expected me to be dead? Northern let out a short laugh. Aha. No, not at all. His laughter died as he exhaled, his expression shifting to one of serious gratitude. When I was fighting Cryos, I noted the destruction around us. I wondered if I, as a mundane person, could have survived it. I tried to control the damage, but that would have meant holding back, a luxury I couldn't afford. He offered a somber smile. I just hoped all of you were safe. What about Raven, Jessi, Linus, and that paragon? Thalen smiled in response. They are all fine. You need not worry about us. You have shouldered too much alone. You are hardly in a position to be worrying about us again. His gaze then fell, his expression darkening. Northern noticed and leaned forward, his expression concerned. What's wrong, Headmaster? Thalen clenched his fists on his knees, hesitating. Just then, Raven landed beside them. Northern, what is this? She asked, frowning as she examined the prism trapping him. He glanced at her. All constructed this safe space for me. He then returned his focus to Thalen. Headmaster? What is it? His gaze darted to Raven. Is there something I should know? Raven exhaled and looked away. The paragon. He's dead. The news hit Northern like a physical blow, freezing him in place. It was unbelievable. That's not possible. He was the strongest of you all. Raven lowered her head. All commanded him to commit suicide. And he did. Northern's expression darkened. What? Why? How? Raven's tone was clear and direct. Apparently, because we have been listening to her voice since the day we awakened. She planted a command in everyone's mind. She can simply order anyone to do her bidding. Northern's eyes flared with alarm. Jessi, is she okay? Raven nodded with a small, grim smile. She's fine. I have no idea how twisted she is. The way she overcame the command was eerie. Northern chuckled slightly, recalling his first encounter with her. She is an eerie person, generally. He looked at both of them. How are both of you? He suddenly froze mid-sentence, his body trembling. Raven and Thalen looked at him with immediate worry. Raven poised her black wing to strike the prism, but Northern cried out. Hey! Stop that! Raven, confused, quickly halted her attack and stepped back. What's wrong? You seem to be in pain. Thalen worriedly inquired, moving closer. However, Northern was smiling, though sweat beaded his brow as he nodded at them. He strained to speak. Y-U-T-2. D, don't worry about me. Leave. I need a moment to myself. Thalen hesitated, his worry deepening. But Northern sighed and shooed them away. Leave. Chase all down. This whole thing is about to end. Thalen looked at him, then nodded with resolve. He turned to Raven. Lady Raven. He surged upward on a tornado of green wind. Raven looked at Northern and asked, "Is it like that time?" Northern managed a slight nod, suppressing a groan. "Something like that, I think." Raven smirked slightly and took off. Finally, Northern collapsed to the ground, releasing a painful, guttural scream as if his insides were being gutted. Status penalty has been served. You have gained 6,000 talent fragments. Your soul is evolving. Another distinct evolution has been detected. A strange phenomenon is occurring. Your soul evolution is being consumed by this strange ongoing evolution. Tyranny of change, tyranny of emulation, endless, unwritten, infinite eyes. Omniform is bringing it all together. The system is evolving. You are evolving. Northern saw the notifications and groaned painfully. Yeah, this is certainly going to hurt like never before. Northern's scream tore through the crystalline prison. A sound so raw and primal it seemed to fracture the very fabric of the distorted space around him. The pain ignited as a searing blaze in his chest, like molten iron flooding directly into his heart. Then it detonated outward. Every nerve in his body erupted simultaneously. His bones began to crack, not breaking but transforming. He felt each fracture as his skeletal structure remapped itself, vertebrae wrenching, ribs expanding and contracting in a rhythm that defied natural anatomy. At first, Northern felt a flash of anger because the same thing had happened just moments ago, but the pain immediately overwhelmed him, forcing a grim conclusion through the haze of agony. This is different. It's like... His thought shattered as his muscles began to tear themselves apart and reweave. Fibers separated and reconnected in new patterns, growing denser, then lighter, then denser again. His body couldn't decide what it was becoming because it was trying to become everything. Congratulations! After 73 days, your internal body structures have been remodeled. Before he could think further, pain flooded his entire body. His skin rippled like water, his flesh becoming translucent, then solid, then something between. He watched in horror as his hand became momentarily ethereal, then crystallized like ice, then returned to flesh before starting the cycle again. Northern realized through gritted teeth, Omniform is not just changing me, it's integrating with everything I am. Tyranny of change, tyranny of emulation, endless, all of it. Forging something unified. His azure eyes burned in their sockets, tears of blood streaming down his face as his vision fractured into 1,000 different spectrums. The Infinite Eyes attribute was being consumed, reconstructed into something far more terrifying. Layers of perception began to stack within his consciousness. The world suddenly became transparent before his eyes. He could see into the stones, their properties, the entire ground itself, even deep into the crust. But the sight was scorching, searing into his very being as the evolution progressed. Congratulations! After 38 days, your external body structures have been successfully remodeled. This time, the pain plunged deeper. His organs shifted position within his body cavity. His heart stopped, restarted with a different rhythm, and stopped again. Each time it failed, panic seized him, but Endless wouldn't let him die. It forced his body to adapt, to find new ways to sustain itself through endless cellular iteration. Concepts being etched into his soul like commandments carved in stone. His lungs collapsed and reformed with different structures. For several subjective months, he couldn't breathe at all. His body sustained by pure essence circulation. Then suddenly he could breathe again, but the air felt wrong, too thin, as if his lungs now required something more than mere oxygen. Northern's screams became hoarse, then silent as his vocal cords restructured themselves. He lay in a pool of his own sweat and blood, his body convulsing as reality itself seemed to warp around him. The notifications kept coming, scrolling past his tear-blurred vision. Soul rank evolution, initiating, due to surplus amount of talent fragments, evolution from transient ephemeral evanescent in progress. This will break you twice as much as a normal evolution. Omniform has absorbed tyranny of change and tyranny of emulation. Omniform's evolution is nearing its end. Omniform's evolution is affecting your base race and changing its properties. Your internal body has been remodeled. Your external body has been remodeled. All conditions for the new race have been met. Your race is evolving. Then came a new horror. His nervous system was being rewritten. Every sensation became amplified 1,000-fold. The mere touch of his clothing against his skin felt like razors. The faint vibration of air molecules became a cacophony. He could feel every atom of his body individually, each one screaming as it was forced to accommodate powers that were never meant to coexist in a single vessel. I wanted this, Northern reminded himself through the torment. I wanted to carve my own path, with blood and fire, with my own will. He groaned in pain again and clenched his teeth powerfully. The clenching itself was another torment on its own. This is so hard, Arg. But knowing that didn't make it hurt less. His white hair fell out in clumps only to regrow instantly. Sometimes white, sometimes black, sometimes colors that had no name. His facial structure shifted subtly, his body unable to maintain a consistent form as Omniform repeatedly structured a race that optimized strength, then speed, then durability, then essence capacity, cycling through permutations faster than his conscious mind could track. Months passed, perhaps, subjective months of unending agony. Northern lost track of time entirely. He existed in a perpetual state of transformation. His body became a battlefield where his attributes warred for dominance while trying to synthesize into something unified. Your race has evolved into a new race, the first of your kind, the demon of form. Origin of Endless is establishing core principles of your new race. Warning. Soul structure approaching critical instability. Endless. Infinite iteration stabilizing consciousness. Shingon Demon Eye. Formation beginning. The pain was less agonizing than the former ones, except that now there was a searing sensation in both of his eyes and he had permanently gone blind. Northern did not know for how long he was blind, but he knew that at some point he grew accustomed to the burning sensation in his eyes. He couldn't remember there being a time when his eyes did not burn on top of his blindness. Then one fateful day, something clicked into place within his eyes. The first layer of the demon eye, third eye, has been locked permanently into your soul. Third eye, the base form of demon eye, can see muscles, blood flow, and joints like a living blueprint. It predicts movements milliseconds before they happen. As the first layer of Shingon locked itself permanently into his soul, suddenly, even through the pain, he could see through things. He saw the internal structure of the crystalline prison, the flow of essence within his own mutating body, the very bones beneath his reforming flesh. But the gift came with a price. The sensory overload nearly shattered his mind. He could see too much, perceive too much, understand too much all at once. His only saving grace from not turning out brain-dead instantly was that, even though this was nothing compared, Northern was already accustomed to taking in vast amounts of information and diversifying his cognitive flow. He overcame going brain-dead and continued to live in his world of pain. The second layer of the demon eye, flow perception, has been locked permanently into your soul. Flow perception perceives momentum, pressure, and rhythm in real time. Not just where your opponent will strike, but when and how hard, based on the weight of their motion. You can slip into empty points in this rhythm and strike where there is no resistance. Now Northern could see not just structure but movement, the currents of essence and energy that surged through everything. His own blood became visible streams of crimson light, his nerves electric blue pathways of sensation. Every transformation his body underwent became a visible cascade of cause and effect. It was beautiful and horrifying in equal measure. His bones became denser, restructured at the molecular level as his form developed instinctively. His blood turned to essence-rich fluid that pulsed with a new rhythm, each heartbeat creating and destroying cells in an endless cycle of renewal. Each change brought fresh agony. After a while, something strange happened. Northern began to see visions. More accurately, he began to perceive the echoes of what he had been and what he was becoming. He saw himself fragment into countless possibilities, versions of himself that could have been, might be, would never exist. The demon of form showed him every permutation of Northern Longguard and Rian Artemis Reamguard that could exist across infinite realities, yet all within this one. He saw himself as a prince. He saw himself as a stable boy. He saw himself as the bastard of the Kageyama clan. He saw himself as an elf. He saw himself slain at birth. He saw himself die during his first awakening process. He saw himself go to the academy as a cleaner. He saw himself as an instructor. And then they all began to compress into one. The pain reached new heights as his talents began to evolve. Oblivion's mark burned itself deeper into his soul. Its component abilities: Absolute Lock, Nullify, Curse Reversal. Each expanding, growing more potent as they fed on his ascending soul rank. One's true self split him apart conceptually. For months of subjective time, he existed as multiple beings simultaneously yet again, true clone fragmenting his consciousness while soul synchronization tried to hold him together. The experience of being one and many at the same time nearly shattered his mind. The evolution of other talents drove things even farther over the edge. Sun's legacy ignited heat through his body. His blood boiled, his flesh charred and regenerated in endless cycles. Ashen Eternity, Sola Nova, Omnithermic Sense. Each ability carved itself into his being with white-hot agony. For 3 subjective months, he burned. His body temperature soared to levels that should have incinerated him, but the demon of form adapted, creating heat-resistant structures even as they were destroyed and rebuilt. The Twilight Phoenix ability awakened in this crucible, ensuring that every death by burning was followed by resurrection. Then came the cold. Frostheart awakened in opposition to the flames, his body temperature plummeting to absolute zero. Ice crystals formed in his blood. His flesh froze solid, shattered, and reformed. The war between fire and ice within his body was its own unique torture. Burning and freezing simultaneously, his nerves unable to decide which sensation to report. The remaining talents tore into his body and soul in rapid succession. Whispering gale filled his lungs with blade winds that shredded him from the inside. Lightning rod channeled enough electricity through his nervous system to kill a normal person 1,000 times over. Eclipsing dread wrapped him in shadows that tried to consume his very essence. Phantom strike made his body phase in and out of reality, each shift feeling like being torn between dimensions. Full impact compressed and expanded his mass repeatedly, each change threatening to collapse him into a singularity of force or explode him into atoms. Soul thread wove through his being, connecting every disparate part of himself into a cohesive whole even as they tried to fly apart. Through it all, the origin of Endless kept him alive, kept iterating his cells through every possible configuration, creating new ones that were more advanced, adapted to the pain, the agony, the effects of all the talents. The third layer of the demon eye, Phantom Future, has been locked permanently into your soul. The eye projects branching possibilities of the next few seconds. You can choose which branch to collapse into reality with your action. It's not true precognition. It's ruthless probability manipulation through speed and precision, making your opponents feel like you're always 1 second ahead. Phantom Future, based on what Northern heard from the system, was something that worked exclusively for battle. It brought no overwhelming pain of its own, but instead of feeling joyful, Northern felt nothing. He was so used to the pain by now that he felt numbed by it. It was an agony of its own, one that made him silent, and that silence was his loudest cry. Finally, Northern felt his soul crystallize. He felt the before imperceptible boundary. His limits were obliterated and pushed far further, like going beyond the horizon. His essence capacity expanded exponentially, his very existence becoming more real, more permanent in the fabric of reality. The demon of form has reached a new plateau and has developed techniques that would allow you to merge and reshape not just your body but the very essence of what you copied. New abilities have been released. Basic Transformation, LV. 1 out of 10. Echo Summoning, LV. 1 out of 10. Advanced Fusion, LV. 1 out of 10. Soul Forge Mastery, LV. 1 out of 10. Endless Integration. Requires Soul Rank. Origin. Omniform State. Locked. The origin of Endless has expanded your capabilities. New abilities have been released. Infinite Iteration. LV. 1 out of 10. Recursive Generation. LV. 1 out of 10. Conceptual Multiplication. Locked. Requires Soul Rank. Zenith. Reality Recursion. Locked. Requires Soul Rank. Origin. Narrative Dominance. Locked. Requires Soul Rank. Divine. Absolute Endless. Locked. Requires Soul Rank. Primordial. Northern wasn't finished processing all the feeds the system was now giving, both with its now feminine and pristine voice and a clear, transparent panel screen, when everything, all the accumulated pain, all the transformations, all the changes, compressed into a single moment of absolute unification. Every attribute, every power, every fragment of his being was forced into alignment under the framework of a system. In that moment, the voice, gentle and almost human in its tone, rang out. System Evolution. Complete. Soul Rank Evolution. Complete. New Soul Rank. Paragon. System Designation. Omniform Ascendancy System. Core Abilities Established. Shingon Demon Eye. 3 layers active. Demon of Form. Primary Evolution complete. Origin of Endless. Primary Evolution complete. Unwritten. Integration complete. All talents. Enhanced. New abilities unlocked across all talents. Northern wasn't sure how to feel. He sat there, still within the space prison, staring down in blank shock. The pain was intense and world-ending, or at least it felt like his world was ending. And he'd used an entire year to undergo a transformation thanks to the damn Omniform? Northern thought deeply about the implications and suddenly felt profoundly grateful to Ul, even though she had no idea what she'd done. Without her space prison, Omniform's evolution wouldn't have completed anytime soon. The entire process would have been triggered 3 months from now, and he would have been living every day of his life in intense pain. Northern envisioned that future 3 months out. With how Cryos was adapting to his attacks, that future looked bleak. Still, he was confident he'd survive. Having tasted death once, he knew how to evade it. Right now, though, none of that mattered. What's done was done, and Northern, after 3 months that felt like 3 years, was now a paragon. A paragon before 18. The world's going to be in shock. His belly danced with sparkles as he thought about it. He was genuinely looking forward to the future, grinning. Well then, let's see what treasures you've brought. At once, the system's voice appeared. Omniform Ascendancy System. Would you like to designate a name? Northern recoiled in disbelief at what he saw. This is strange. It felt like the system was directly conversing with him. Having adapted to its non-responsive, one-dimensional nature, Northern felt genuinely stunned. Then he leaned forward. Aside from the stylized runes delivering the message, the voice was also soothing. Do I need to? Decision is entirely at user's discretion. The Omniform Ascendancy System has been optimized to assist you effectively, not just with your ascension, but also to realize the full potential of each rank. Northern gave an agreeable look and nod. Okay, that works. A name, huh? His gaze lingered on the blue interface for a moment. Then his eyes sparkled. I've got it. What about Blue? Do you want call code to be registered as Blue? Northern rubbed his chin, looking uncertain. I mean, don't you think it's a cool name? And you're Blue too, so win-win, yeah. The Omniform Ascendancy System does not have the capability to think outside its purpose. Northern settled on his decision a moment later. Let's go for Blue. Wait. Aoi. Aoi. Register the call code as Aoi. It's a remnant from my memory of a strange language in my old world. And it fits perfectly. Wait. You know I'm not from this world, right? Correct. Call code has been registered as Aoi. Do you wish to inspect your current profile? Northern nodded. Sure, why not? Also, I'm curious. Do I have to speak aloud for you to hear me? Or can you hear my thoughts? Thoughts directed to me will be delivered. You can restrict this as you deem fit. No, it's convenient. Profile. User. Rian Artemis Riem Guard. True name. Unwritten. Soul rank. Evanescent. Paragon. Essence. 100%. Talent fragments. 0/700000. Core abilities. Demon of Form. Unwritten. Origin of Endless. Shingon Demon Eye. Talents. Demon of Form Mastery. Basic Transformation LV. 1 out of 10. Echo Summoning LV. 1 out of 10. Advanced Fusion LV. 1 out of 10. Soul Forge Mastery LV. 1 out of 10. Endless Integration. Requires Soul Rank. Origin. Omniform State. Locked. Unwritten Mastery. Naming LV. 1 out of 10. Unnaming LV. 1 out of 10. Saved names. 1, 0/7. Origin of Endless Mastery. Infinite Iteration LV. 1 out of 10. Recursive Generation LV. 1 out of 10. Conceptual Multiplication. Locked. Requires Soul Rank. Zenith. Reality Recursion. Locked. Requires Soul Rank. Origin. Narrative Dominance. Locked. Requires Soul Rank. Divine. Absolute Endless. Locked. Requires Soul Rank. Primordial. Shingon Mastery. Layer 1. Third Eye LV. 1 out of 10. Layer 2. Flow Perception LV. 1 out of 10. Layer 3. Causality Fracture LV. 1 out of 10. Layer 4. Zero Motion Realm. Requires Soul Rank. Transcendent. Layer 5. Endless Divergence. Requires Soul Rank. Origin. Layer 6. Locked. Requires Soul Rank. Divine. Talents. Copied Talents. 0 out of 7. Own Talents. 10. Woven Talents. 0 out of 10. Northern's mouth fell open. Oh, it's long. His mouth stayed open for a moment. Then a frown darkened his face. Aoi, not to sound ungrateful or anything, but what the hell is that? Northern was pointing to the talent fragments section. Talent fragments required to proceed to next soul rank luminary. 700,000. What the hell, Aoi, what the hell? At this point, I'll never become a luminary. You certainly will. Why is it so much? Why do I receive a boon only to get shackled yet again? And it happens every time. It's almost as if some author over my life is trying their damnedest to wreck my story. There was a beat of silence. When a member of the human race becomes a paragon, their soul core undergoes a major expansion. This causes an increase in the essence their soul core can hold and is a gentle preparation toward breaking through the human limit. For you, however, your entire soul itself was expanded. But also, because you became an origin before then, the expansion was beyond what should have been possible. If this logic is to be visualized, think of standing in the middle of the sea, unable to see where it ends, only where it meets the horizon. Northern nodded, amazed at how flawlessly he was understanding Aoi. Talent fragments are indirectly connected to your essence pool. Since your soul has undergone an entire world-level expansion, Endless made it even more expansive. Without Endless, it would have probably taken you 70,000 talent fragments to proceed to the next rank. Northern was silent for a moment, seriously considering what Aoi explained. Based on what I know about paragons and how difficult it is for them to advance to the next rank, this actually makes a lot of sense. Northern continued inspecting the rest of his profile. So, what does it mean to be a demon? Since you are the first of your kind, my answer may need consistent updates based on your future functionalities. Superior internal body, superior external body. Omniform reformed your body to enable it to adapt to the strain placed on it by Endless. This, however, caused an evolution that had to diverge from the fundamentals of humanity. Northern side. Is there anything I should be worried about? Like flaws specific to me? None at this moment. Current knowledge of your physiology and functionality will be updated based on future functionalities. I can still poop, right? Current knowledge of your physiology and functionality will be updated based on future functionalities. Northern side again. I better be able to. How else am I going to think about my life? Northern looked at his profile again, inspecting it all the way down. Do you think you can explain my core abilities? A lot has certainly changed and been added. Can you give me a rundown of them all? Certainly. This is a rundown of your core abilities synthesis. Step 1. You fight, study, or interact with something. Step 2. Your demon eye scans it completely structure. Bones, muscles, organs, abilities, how they work, energy flow, power source, soul signature, essence of what it is. Unwritten works in perfect tandem with your demon eye to fully grasp the soul signature and thus give you the decision to copy, take, or erase their name. Although some of this abilities are limited as will be later shown. Step 3. After defeating or thoroughly analyzing, a complete blueprint stored in SoulForge and you can now become that thing. Step 4. Endless multiplies it. Infinite iteration creates 10 variants at LV. 1. Recursive generation evolves them over time. One form becomes hundreds, then thousands. I shall give simple definition of all your abilities. Demon of Form Mastery. Basic Transformation. LV. 1 out of 10. You can transform into any form you've copied. At this level, you can only any copied form for as long as your essence allows, but there is a 5 seconds transformation delay. Advanced Fusion. LV. 1 out of 10. You can combine forms together to create hybrids and merge echoes with each other or with your forms. At this level, you can only fuse 2 forms or echoes or 1 echo and 1 form. Echo Summoning. LV. 1 out of 10. You can summon defeated enemies as loyal copies to fight for you with their original abilities. At this level, you can summon only 1,000. SoulForge Mastery. LV. 1 out of 10. This is your inner dimension where everything is stored. You can train, modify, and organize your forms/echoes here. At this level, the space is 5 square kilometers and time ratio is 1:10. SoulForge. Size. Tier 1, 5 square kilometers. Echoes, 0 stored. Forms, 0 cataloged. Time flow, 1 second equals 10 second. Endless integration. Requires soul rank. Primordial. Information unavailable due to soul rank restriction. Omniform state. Locked. Requirements. Soul rank primordial plus all demon abilities LV. 10. Effect. Be all forms at once. Transcend the concept of shape. Origin of endless mastery. Infinite iteration. LV. 1 out of 10. You can create a variation of anything you copy and understand, and regenerate your body or any understood body by iterating cells to undamaged versions. At this level, you can only create 2 variants per form, and regenerate cuts in minutes. Recursive generation. LV. 1 out of 10. You can create evolutionary branches for variants. At this level, you can only create 1 generation deep, A1. Conceptual multiplication. Locked. Requires soul rank. Zenith. Information unavailable due to soul rank limitation. Reality recursion. Locked. Requires soul rank. Origin. Information unavailable due to soul rank limitation. Narrative dominance. Locked. Requires soul rank. Divine. Information unavailable due to soul rank limitation. Absolute endless. Locked. Requires soul rank. Primordial. Information unavailable due to soul rank limitation. Shingen Mastery. Layer 1, Third Eye LV. 1 out of 10. At this level, you can see through objects, X-ray vision. Layer 2, Flow Perception, LV. 1 out of 10. At this level, you can sense movement and momentum. Layer 3, Causality Fracture, LV. 1 out of 10. At this level, you can see 2 to 3 possible futures. Layer 4, Zero Motion Realm, requires soul rank, Transcendent. Information unavailable due to soul rank limitation. Layer 5, Endless Divergence, requires soul rank, Origin. Information unavailable due to soul rank limitation. Talents. Copied talents, 0 out of 7. You can copy 7 talents at your current soul rank. Own talents, 10. These talents have been personalized to suit you only and are owned by you. They will grow as your soul evolves. Oblivion's Mark, One's True Self, Sun's Legacy, Frostheart, Whispering Gale, Lightning Rod, Eclipsing Dread, Phantom Strike, Full Impact, Soul Thread, Woven Talents, 0 out of 10. This is an upgraded version of DIY touched by Omniform and structured to fit the new heights of the Demon of Form. Woven Talents is the permanent fusion of multiple abilities. Name Mastery. You are a creature that cannot be written. Fate, history, memories will find it difficult to write into their principles. Naming, LV. 1 out of 10. You can give names to unnamed things. At this level, the naming will give only a slight power boost based on the essence and truth of the name. Unnaming, LV. 1 out of 10. You can remove names. At this level, you temporarily remove names. The name will be restored when your essence is depleted or when you return it. Saved names, 1, 0/7. You can save copied ordinary names / true names. The limit will increase with your soul rank. Northern's mouth hung open as Aoi continued spilling it all, stylized runes spawning endlessly before his eyes. Her words flowed simply enough that he grasped many things, but just as many concepts refused to stick, his brain too sluggish to digest them. Wow, Aoi, this is a lot. Indeed, if you'd like, I can break down all your talent abilities. They've been enhanced and restructured according to the Demon of Form. Wait, we can tackle that later. Right now, there's a battle raging, and not knowing what's happening is killing me. Currently, you possess 8 secondary perception abilities from your own talents. With Third Eye, all internal structures are laid bare before you. I've deduced this is useful for detecting hidden enemies, traps, and weak points. Flow Perception allows you to track the movement of everyone and everything around you. I've deduced that Layer of Shingon is most effective in combat. It anticipates attacks by reading motion patterns and perceives the broader flow of combat and environmental dynamics. You have Sun's Legacy, Omnithermic Sense, which perceives all heat signatures within miles. Whispering Gale, Wind Compass, which reveals the direction and speed of all air currents. Aoi! Wait. Northern drew a deep breath. I need to see what's happening right now. What's your recommendation? And am I supposed to just activate all these abilities at once? I will categorize them into passive and active abilities. Passive perception abilities will focus on spatial awareness, and when a trigger is detected, the others will activate. Passive perception abilities have been grouped. Note that abilities have been optimized for low essence consumption and prevention of cognitive overload. Wind Compass, subconscious awareness of air currents. Omnithermic Sense, reduced. Basic heat detection within 100 meters. Eyes of the Shadow, natural dark vision when in shadows. Thread flow, ambient. Vague sense of connections, not detailed. Instantly, a torrent of information flooded into Northern's mind. He trembled, nearly recoiling from the onslaught. Too many sounds. Too many fluctuations rippling around him. Too many foreign signals screaming threats. The sheer vastness of it swallowed him whole. He felt shapeless, formless, drowning in sensation. Activating ability. Infinite iteration. Your cells are being iterated to adapt to the turbulence of new information. In barely a second, everything smoothed out. Northern had never felt calmer. A peace so profound, so soothing, it reflected in his eyes as his radiant blue gaze softened with a gentle glow. A small smile curved his lips. Ah, why do I feel like a god? The night reigned supreme, two gentle moons sitting apart in the sky, casting scattered shadows across the vast, wounded battlefield. Those shadows were Northern's eyes. The appalling thing was that he could see everything. Cryos battling Ull, Raven and Thalen fighting off the trees corrupted with madness. The Chaos Prince floating somewhere beyond Ull and Cryos. Far opposite from Cryos and the rest, Jeskai and Linus trudged toward them, exhausted. Even farther away, Revant battled Call. All the information flowed in seamlessly, and Northern felt omnipresent. He had no trouble separating what was what. The ferocious clash of their battle pounded against his skin. He could feel the heat wrapping around their bodies like cloth, letting him sense their emotions, their fatigue, their resolve. Eyes of the Shadow extended even farther, showing Northern Emperor Galahad, the Tower Master, the old man he'd seen before, and several knights who died gruesome deaths fighting to stop the grotesque rolling wall. Many were being transformed into grotesque beings. The Emperor's presence made a significant difference, but it was only a matter of time before they were driven to the edge. Eyes of the Shadow covered 1 kilometer in total, stopping just at the ocean's tip. Northern raised a brow, slightly confused. Is Mother cooking? Something else immediately distracted him. A devastating blow that struck Ull and sent her reeling. He snapped his full attention to that, though Northern, being slightly sentimental, still left a fragment watching over his mother. Until Byran seemed to turn toward his direction and bowed. Which was strange, considering he was 1,000 meters away. But it would have been weirder if Byran couldn't sense him. Ull and Cryos were going at it. The Origin pinned her to the ground and dragged her across the terrain, her face smashing through rocks and trees alike. It was brutal. That's not how you treat a lady. Northern continued watching them, meanwhile sitting in the prism with a peaceful look in his eyes. As Northern focused intently on the fight, his eyes changed. A single black ring appeared at the center of his blue irises, and immediately, his vision sharpened. You are using Demon Eye. All available layers and interlocking. Oh? Even from here. He could see Cryos' contracting and expanding muscles, the flow of each movement, which let him predict how Cryos would attack next. Cryos launched himself up and crashed down with vicious speed, unleashing a shockwave that devastated the desert and left an enormous crater. Moments before it happened, Northern had predicted Cryos would unleash a heavy power attack with a jump, but also suspected Ull wouldn't dodge it based on her current state. Cryos' hit should have landed, but Ull won by pure, unwavering desperation alone, which Northern commended. If only she could put such effort into doing what's right. Then there was Revant and Call. The two looked beaten and battered in equal measure, but it pained Northern to realize Revant was in much rougher shape than Call. He had cuts all over his body, blood dried in different spots, his hair and face damp with sweat. His shirt had been shredded, leaving only his trousers. Even his fine, glossy black shoes had been torn off long ago. Northern found one of them buried in sand near a crumbled rock. Call looked ragged, tired, shallow cuts covering his body, his expression gloomy. Revant, on the other hand, brimmed with unsettling glee. Not the kind one should have while getting beaten. Is he enjoying it? It almost seemed so. In fact, Northern was compelled to think he was. He gave the ground a wistful look. It would have been nice if I could stretch it over the sea and see how the others are doing. Finally, Northern stretched in the prism and looked up with a small smile. Well then, time to end all of this. He studied the prism with a cold glow on his eyes. Aoi! Thought you'd never ask. Based on the Demon Eye's analysis of the prism, there are 6 different abilities that can be used to pass through. Northern leaned back, stunned. Oh? 6? So not only can I break through easily, but 6 of my abilities can. Correct. Tell me about the first one. Oblivion's Mark Nullify has been enhanced to passively release an amount of nullification aura around you that weakens any unnatural phenomena. You can actively use more essence to cancel ongoing effects. Since a space prism is essentially a sustained construction of an outlier authority, it's considered unnatural by the laws of this realm, so you simply nullify it and walk out. Just like that. Correct. He chuckled in disbelief. Let me hear about the next one. Since it's nighttime and there are many shadows within and outside the prism, you can simply teleport between them using Eclipsing Dread, Eclipse Step. Even your own shadow against the prism wall could serve as an exit point. This will cost you more essence since it's the pseudo-authority of a being with higher soul rank than you. How much? About 1%. Northern looked shocked. Wait, how much will Nullify take? 0.0791%. Northern fell silent in disbelief. Due to your race, the potency of your soul essence is much higher than any other race. Northern nodded slowly, absorbing Aoi's words. Is that so? He was still reeling from the shock, silent for a beat. Then he asked hesitantly, the next. Using Sun's legacy Embers of Oblivion, you can create black flames that consume everything, matter and energy. These flames will burn until nothing remains. The prism would simply cease to exist. However, this is extremely dangerous and should be a last resort. Okay, so which is the most insulting way, considering the one who trapped me here is a much higher rank and probably hoping to find me old and gray? Since you have analyzed the prism, you can copy it and create a superior version using infinite iteration and recursive generation. Then nullify this one and walk through it while trapping the caster with a perfected version of their own craft. Their supposed authority. A wide grin split Northern's face. Go ahead. That little smile of amusement, mischief dancing in its corners, lingered on Northern's lips as Aoi's announcement rang out. You have copied a new form, Space Prism. Form has been saved into your soul forge. 2 variants have been generated. Northern exhaled and stood, staring at the prism wall before snapping his fingers. Space Prism has been nullified. He strode through it as if walking through empty air. Recursive generation is evolving the 2 variants. This may take a while. Northern emerged from the prism like he was passing through an invisible curtain. He glanced down at his clothes. Aoi, I can't arrive at a gathering of origins looking this ragged. What do you suggest? You can copy cloth form and use infinite iteration to repair damaged areas of your clothes. You can copy any cloth form and create variants of it. The cloth variants can also be evolved. Northern blinked. I can evolve clothes too? Correct. What form can't I copy and evolve? Currently, due to the limit of your soul rank, you cannot copy pure abstract concepts like speed, time, victory, or non-physical phenomena like weather or emotions. You also cannot copy gods/beings beyond your soul rank and things Shingon can't fully analyze. Northern grimaced. That's disappointing. But considering I started with just copying and evolving talents, this is more than enough. He sighed and examined his clothes. Copy. Form. School uniform has been copied. Infinite iteration is iterating damaged parts of form. Clan's uniform. Northern exhaled and shredded it off with one hand. Surprisingly easy. He simply grabbed the fabric and tore it with minimal effort. Then he walked forward, his pale muscles rippling with celestial sharpness, as if carved from the very clouds of heaven. His lean frame was taut and grew tauter still. Slowly, Northern's feet lifted off the ground. He ascended higher and higher, clad only in white underwear. Even my flight feels different, feels effortless. Before, Northern had needed conscious effort to lift himself and maintain altitude. But something was fundamentally different now. Aoi, how am I even flying? What's the mechanism? Flight is possible due to enhanced whispering gale passive ability. Wind embrace. The wind loves you. It catches you when you fall, guides your projectiles, carries your voice, and shields you from airborne attacks. Flight comes naturally. Right now, flight is as easy for you as breathing. Northern smirked. Aha! Nice. Then he launched forward. His velocity exploded and he vanished before even the breeze could register his departure. Mid-flight, the uniform materialized, neat and sharp, spreading over his body as though the fabrics were alive. Cryos hurtled backward at horrifying speed as Ul, using a devastating amount of power that shattered her hand, punched him away. He tumbled and crashed through the desert, nearing the vast empire step by step before stopping midway, close to the grove left exposed when the wall had forced itself from the ground. Ul, with a broken forearm, stalked toward him, walking at first, then breaking into a run, dark fury twisting her features. But suddenly, she skidded to a halt. Barely a second later, someone, or something, dropped in front of her, displacing sand in a massive circular pattern. She shielded her eyes from the dust, then looked back, her delicate eyes widening in horror. A moment later, she frowned. "You! What are you doing here? How did you—" "Shut up!" Sudden silence descended as Northern barked the command. She froze, stunned. Then realization struck. She had actually obeyed, and a grimace darkened her face. "You maggot! How dare you command me?" She lunged toward Northern. At the same time, Cryos had risen and was surging forward from afar at tremendous speed. Northern opened his palm and extended his hand. His cells iterated in milliseconds. For an imperceptible instant, his arm stretched beyond normal limits and seized Ul's face mid-charge. Then he extended his other hand and waited 2 seconds. Cryos' fist surged toward him with explosive force, but Northern's outstretched hand stabbed forward, catching the Origin's blow. His hand trembled. The sleeve of his newly created school uniform tore to shreds from the impact, and even his skin was flayed, shallow wounds blooming across it. Cryos' expression flickered. For a single moment, the Origin betrayed signs of shock and fear, but he grinned the next second, menace spilling from the dangerous glint in his eyes. "You fool! Catching my fist with your bare hands was a fatal mistake. Every one of my strikes is imbued with the essence of madness. You're moments away from being devoured." Northern's eyes drifted to his wounded arm, regarding it with indifference. "Aoi! Shingon is studying the form of this madness, and infinite iteration is already repairing damaged cells to enable optimum adaptation. You need not worry about anything, but if you wish, I can simply use Nullify to erase the curse of madness in your blood. I can also use Curse Reversal to inflict the damage back on him, but that would prove ineffective since he is the origin of madness. He may simply grow stronger. Don't worry, let me handle this one. I want to savor this moment." He gave Cryos a small, gentle smile. "Is that so?" The manic grin on the Origin's face froze. His eyes flickered with uncertainty as he examined Northern. He could see it, feel it. Something was fundamentally different about the human standing before him, if he could even be called that anymore, because his entirety felt distant from humanity. His scent, his body, his presence, the look in his eyes, everything had changed. Meanwhile, Ul was still struggling in Northern's other hand. His grip locked tight around her face. The face in his palm felt fragile, like holding a baby's face. So Northern was careful not to apply too much pressure. He wouldn't break Terrence's face. He glanced down at Cryos' hand, however. "That one looks very crushable." Northern tightened his fist around the Origin's hand, and in that instant, Cryos let out an ugly, guttural wail, unbefitting of a supposedly higher being. "Ah!" Northern had to admit. He'd never thought a cry so ugly and guttural could sound so pleasing to his ears. He released Cryos' fist, at least what remained of it. The hand was mangled bone, wrecked, fingers broken at grotesque angles. Shattered fragments had invaded his bloodstream and were tearing through his skin. Silver blood poured from his hands, and everything looked like a celestial mess. Northern regarded it with a flicker of pity. "This has to be the most an Origin has bled, right?" He looked at Cryos, his expression sympathizing with him over the matter of his hand. Meanwhile, the Origin stared at Northern with a deeply horrified face. "No, no, no, this shouldn't be possible. This shouldn't be possible. This shouldn't be possible. This shouldn't be possible. His face twisted into grotesque rage. How can a mere mortal have superior strength to the embodiment of chaos itself? Northern gave him a dismissive smirk. Stop that. Stop it. Stop lying. You're no embodiment of chaos. He gave Cryos a knowing smile and pointed at his eyes. I see better now. He pointed to the right side of Cryos's body. All the chaos you took from me is here. You're having a difficult time digesting it, just as your boy over there is with the void. Apparently, something about the nature of my soul made it a home for chaos and void. You took them away from their home, making matters worse. He raised his chin at Cryos. Chaos is rejecting you, isn't it? You have enough power to suppress it, but that's dividing your attention. Which makes sense because it made no sense that you haven't killed us all, and there's the minimal use of your madness tendencies. I expected something more vast, that the entire terrain for 1,000 kilometers would be overturned, that the oceans themselves would be turning on us. He gave Cryos a disappointed look. But now that I can see, I understand. And honestly, it's painful. I had all my hopes up for nothing. Cryos glared with primal viciousness. You mere wind. Wind manipulation has been used. Cryos's entire world shook before he could grasp what was happening. He opened his eyes and was already far away, seeing Northern, who stood on the ground, holding Ul's face in his grasp, as a tiny dot. The Origin had been hurled into the sky by a storm of wind that ravaged the entire desert, sending him over 600 meters high in mere milliseconds. Northern studied the result, intrigued. Even wind manipulation is more potent. All abilities have been enhanced, and frankly you poured too much essence into that ability usage, which caused a staggering response. How much? 3%. Northern suppressed a chuckle. Aoi, you might see that as too much, but frankly speaking, 3 out of 100% can't be too much. At the moment. However, you must account for the longevity of the battle and the greed of your skills. At your current rank, due to the rarity of your race, essence replenishment rate is slightly slower compared to consumption rate. Okay, Aoi. I'll try to be more conscious next time. I'm just getting used to all of this. Okay? Northern paused and replayed their conversation. Were you scolding me just now? Incorrect. He still had a feeling that was what had happened, but returned his attention to the young lady in his right hand. Cryos was going to take a while to fall, so he needed to talk to her. Ul remained still in his hands, having surrendered to his grip long ago. The moment he released his hands, she fell to the ground and scrambled back, putting distance between herself and Northern, her face wary and furious at once. It was as if every hair on her skin had stood on end and her awareness and brain had activated a new level of adrenaline fight, triggered by a danger unlike anything she'd ever encountered. However, as soon as she backed away from Northern, the person she backed toward was the same Northern. Eclipse Step has been used. Northern let loose a small smile, gripping Ul's shoulder. It's cute to watch you run from me. Ul glanced over her shoulder, terror painted upon her face by a sadistic and hateful artist, her eyes trembling frantically. It's all right. I won't hurt you. We just need to talk. Northern suddenly looked up, his eyes narrowing. That's faster than I expected. I guess he decided not to care anymore. He returned his eyes to Ul. Give me a moment, Mother Nature. Let me take care of that disease of a man. Northern vanished silently with just a slight displacement of desert sand. Ul tried to shoot away but suddenly crashed into an invisible wall. She frowned and stepped back, running her hand across the air in front of her to detect what it could be. Then her frown turned to shock and disbelief. She ran in another direction, but barely 10 meters in she collided with another wall of air and fell to the ground. From where she sat, she looked up, her expression crumbling. Her lips and voice trembled as she spoke. How? Meanwhile, Northern whispered through the air on a silent gust of wind and seized Cryos, who was shooting downward with crimson flames burning fiercely from his feet. Everything happened so fast that Cryos hadn't even detected him until his hair was suddenly yanked and his direction forcibly altered. Northern rocketed high into the sky at insane speed, yet it felt smooth, peaceful. The turbulent force of gravity wasn't resisting him at all. If anything, it felt like the wind had suddenly started flying in their direction. Cryos twisted his legs the other way and the crimson flames on his feet blazed even more ferociously. But the speed didn't change. In the darkness, the glow of the Origin's crimson flames cast a beautiful red radiance across the side of Northern's face. Cryos gritted his teeth and abandoned his attempt to use more force to fight Northern's speed. Instead, he drove his feet, wreathed in the flames of madness, toward Northern's face. There was a thunderous explosion in the darkness of the sky. Crimson flames scattered like malicious fireworks, and Northern's flight halted for a second. As the flames dissipated, his head was turned slightly sideways by the force of Cryos' kick, the Origin's foot planted on his cheek. That side of his face, which should have been completely scalded by flames of madness, was absolutely fine, save for a small fire scratch near his temple. Northern's eyes shifted down to the Origin from his angle. "You've gone and done it now." Northern's head slowly turned back to face Cryos directly, and the Origin felt something primal coil in his gut. Something that shouldn't exist in a being of his nature. Fear. "You know what? I was going to be gentle, relatively speaking." His grip on Cryos' hair tightened. "But you just had to go for the face." Absolute Zero has been activated. The temperature plummeted so rapidly that the moisture in the air crystallized instantly. Cryos' crimson flames sputtered, flickered, then died. Not a simple extinguishment, but frozen mid-burn, suspended in impossible stillness. The Origin's eyes widened as frost spread across his body like a living thing, creeping up from where Northern held him. His silver blood began to slow, thickening, crystallizing in his veins. "Cold, isn't it?" Northern's voice carried an almost cheerful tone. "And before you start spouting off about your nature of origination and its resistance to such meager abilities." Erasure touch has been applied. A dark mark bloomed where Northern's fingers gripped Cryos' hair, spreading like ink through water. The Origin felt it immediately, creeping slowly, but undeniably there. That inexorable weakening of his abilities. His connection to his own power was beginning to fray at the edges. "That's going to make things interesting for you," Northern continued conversationally, still holding Cryos suspended thousands of meters in the air. "It's slow, sure, but we've got time." "Well, I've got time. You've got less." Cryos snarled, silver blood freezing at the corners of his mouth. "You!" With a staying smile, Northern snapped his fingers. Lightning Chains has been activated. Infinite iteration has been applied to Lightning Chain. The bolt struck Cryos directly in the chest. Not enough to kill, but enough to make every nerve in the Origin's body scream. The electricity didn't stop there. It jumped, arced, chained through his own body repeatedly, each iteration finding new pathways of agony. Northern watched with clinical interest as the Origin convulsed. "Tell me something, Cryos. What in the hell could be so terrible about staying in a peaceful prison? Why did you have to come out? You spent 7,000 years there. 3,000 more honestly wouldn't have been such a big issue. I mean, this wouldn't be happening to you." He looked at Cryos with a puzzled expression. "What benefit do you gain from marching across my world and grinding it to dust? Why must the world suffer for your insecurity? Isn't this pure, unreasonable moral corruption?" Mind you, I'm not a moral person by nature, at least I try not to be. And in all honesty, I wouldn't have cared what you did with this world if I was on my own. But I have 2 mothers, 2 fathers, a couple of elder brothers and sisters. My favorite little Silver just got born into this world. And this is the timing you pick? Wrong timing, Cryos. Really wrong timing. He released Cryos' hair and buried a punch into his gut. The hit was devastating. Silver liquid exploded from behind Cryos' head with a shockwave that tore a wound through the dark clouds. The Origin flew like a tossed coin and began to fall, but only for a moment. Wind manipulation has been activated. Northern didn't let him drop. Instead, the wind caught Cryos like a puppet on strings, suspending him in the air. Then it began to spin him, slowly at first, then faster, faster, until the origin was a blur of silver and crimson, a horizontal cyclone of superior flesh being subjected to forces that would liquefy a normal being. Northern called out, his voice somehow perfectly audible despite the howling wind. This is for dramatic effect, by the way. I know you're not getting dizzy or anything. You're an origin. But it looks really funny from where I'm standing. Supreme Shadow has been activated. Northern's shadow stretched impossibly long in the darkness, reaching across the sky to where Cryos spun. It solidified, became tangible, and grabbed the origin mid-spin, slamming him to a halt with such sudden force that the shockwave rippled through the air. The shadow held Cryos' spread eagle against the night sky, a superior being crucified on darkness itself. Northern drifted closer, the wind carrying him with gentle precision. When he spoke, his tone shifted to something almost professorial. Let me tell you what's going to happen now. You're going to answer some questions. Honestly, completely. Because if you don't, Echo has been activated. Northern snapped his fingers. The sound echoed, and then it echoed again, and again, and again. Each echo hit Cryos like a physical blow. Not painful exactly, but wrong. Each repetition somehow more real than the last, building in intensity until the origin felt like reality itself was slapping him across the face 7 times in rapid succession. I'm going to get creative, and trust me, you have no idea how vast and incomprehensibly diverse my toolkit is now. Cryos glared at him through eyes that were beginning to frost over at the edges. You cannot kill me. Oh, absolutely not. Northern agreed cheerfully. You're an origin. Probably takes some cosmic-level nonsense to actually end you permanently. But here's the thing. He leaned in close, his breath creating small clouds of crystallized air. I don't need to kill you. I just need to make you wish I could. Dread manifestation has been activated. The supernatural fear rolled off Northern in waves, and for the first time in his existence, Cryos felt something he thought impossible, genuine primal terror. Not fear of death, but fear of something worse. Fear of being utterly, completely, humiliatingly overpowered by something that shouldn't be able to touch him. Northern continued, his voice light and conversational again, as if they were discussing the weather. So, question 1, why exactly did you think taking chaos from me was a good idea? Because from where I'm standing, or floating, rather, it seems like you bit off more than you could chew. He paused, studying Cryos' frozen, terror-stricken face. And please take your time answering. We've got all night. Well, I do, and I have a lot of questions. You've got until that mark spreads far enough that you can't even manifest properly anymore. Northern glanced at where the erasure touch mark had spread to cover nearly a quarter of Cryos' torso. Actually, that might be sooner than I thought. Better start talking. Quickly. He smiled. An expression of pure, sadistic delight. Unless you'd like to see what else I picked up recently. I've been dying to try out this absolute lock thing on an actual origin. The description says it can seal abilities completely. I'm curious if it'll work on you. Wanna be my guinea pig? Cryos laughed like a madman. Behavior not befitting the origin of madness even. Just pure, shameless, undignified madness. He looked and sounded like one at this point. Silver blood streaked his teeth as he bared them at Northern. You're all fools. You know nothing. Hence the question, Cryos. Northern gave him a backhanded slap that sent spit and silver blood spraying from his mouth as his head whipped away. What do you want with the chaos? Cryos looked down, trying to fix his shifted jaw. Then he glared at Northern. Isn't it obvious? Power. Northern gave the origin a disgusted look. That you had to murder your son back then and don't mind doing it now? Cryos' eyes blazed with resolve. Despite the power he has, he's a coward. I was and still am the only one who will do what's right. Northern's gaze remained still. And that would be? The resolve in Cryos' eyes didn't waver despite his state. Burn the world to avenge my wife. You think I was thrown in that prison against my will? All of them knew nothing. This was the only way for me to enter the remnants of the Echo Realm and destroy their source of feeding. Northern scrunched his face, looking at Cryos with slight confusion. But he instantly analyzed what the Origin had just said. So you're saying, you allowed yourself to get imprisoned in the line between chaos and peace so you could access the remnant of the Echo Realm, which I presume is my world, to cut whose source of feeding? Cryos gave him a dark, disappointed look. If you cannot reach such conclusions with all I've just said, there's nothing you don't know about this world. Northern was reaching a conclusion actually. It was slightly foreboding to consider, but what Cryos was trying to say was that all of them, right here, right now, served only one purpose: foodstuffs for the Origins. But how? Was it through death? Was it life itself? Everything they knew about history, which part about it made any sense? Northern's mind began to race, and as he felt like he was tugging at the borders of what could be the truth, it was beginning to look as if this was knowledge he should back away from. Because if he continued further, it was going to change everything. Tremendously. Cryos laughed eerily as he watched Northern's face. You're already realizing it, aren't you? Northern frowned for a moment and gave the Origin another sharp slap. Shut up. Tell me, what happened to your wife? She's an Origin. What sort of death could have happened to her that was beyond known or expected? I'm guessing she was killed. By whom and why? That's exactly what I'm asking. I'll be damned to tell you. Northern studied the black marks still spreading over his body. Listen, you're damned already, but you still have your son, and who knows, I could be in the mood and decide to avenge you. The least reasonable thing you can do right now, Cryos, is talk to me. He gently placed a hand on the Origin's shoulder, his voice softening with care. I know it's unexpected and beyond your pay grade of understanding, but it's the truth. You got overpowered by me, beaten black and blue by me, a supposed lower being. Your pride has been ground into the sand, and while that's so difficult to accept, his voice took on an encouraging tone. I implore you to move past the worthless limitations of pride that you've bound yourself with. Realize this is beyond you, and talk to me, right now. I'm the most reasonable person you'll meet in this world, and on your side. He scoffed. Although I'll still fry your ass for causing all this mess, no matter how much you try to justify your reasons. But what I'm saying is, open your mouth and talk. My world has suffered too many centuries or millennia of deception for you to stay tight-lipped. Have some compassion, damn it. Cryos was silent, but there was something thoughtful about his expression. After a few beats of silence, he gritted his teeth. Northern was slightly taken aback. Don't tell me that lame-ass speech worked on him. Anki is not your friend. That boy is my greatest mistake. I never enjoyed killing him, but it was the right thing to do. He's a man who will do anything, be anything in order to serve his own purpose. He's willing to lie shamelessly, deceive people, steal, and slaughter thousands, as long as he gets what he wants. He's a self-serving, shameless being who cannot comprehend the meaning of morality or having limits. Andra's only sin was birthing that child, and he was the reason for her death. My wife had to die because my son enraged the First Origins, and they decided to strike him down. But that wasn't going to be easy because as long as Andra was alive, he was never going to be killable. And Anki knew this was the very reason why he went ahead and did what he did. Northern looked at the man and asked with a grim tone, "What did he do?" At that moment, Northern glanced from the corner of his eye. Chaos Prince was flying towards them with the might of a hurricane, his expression grim. He was so far away that no being had such magnificent eyes that could have seen the look on his face except Northern. Northern swung his hand. Wind manipulation has been used. The Chaos Prince met an even greater hurricane that would keep him busy for a while. And Northern looked at the Origin of madness. Answer me. What did he do? Cryos's eyes became distant, looking past Northern into memories that still burned like fresh wounds. He went to them directly, to the First Origins. Northern's expression shifted to confusion. Why would he? Because my son was arrogant enough to believe he could negotiate with beings who had weaponized their own mother. Cryos's laugh was bitter, hollow. He thought he could convince them that the corruption was spreading beyond their control, that they needed to work together to contain it before it consumed everything. The Origin's silver blood dripped slowly from his mouth as he continued. Anki walked into the first throne, a feat that should have been impossible, and stood before the Council of First Origins. He told them what they'd done to the Void was killing all of existence. He offered them his research, his experiments, everything he'd learned about containing the corruption. Cryos's face twisted with something between rage and grief. And you know what they did? They laughed. The Origin of the Sun told him that mortals and half-breeds didn't get to question their methods, that the Void was their weapon, their creation, and if it destroyed everything, that was still their right to wield it. Northern felt his stomach turn. Then Ul spoke. Cryos's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She was the worst of them. Sweet, gentle Ul, the origin of prosperity and reflection. She told Anki that his concerns were noted but ultimately irrelevant. That the system was working as intended. That the mortal world's essence was flowing perfectly to sustain them. She thanked him for his concern. Then she told him to leave before they decided he was a threat. Northern could see where this was going, but he needed to hear it. What did Anki do? What do you think? Cryos's eyes blazed. He refused to leave. He told them he'd stolen the corrupted Void from their domain specifically because they couldn't be trusted with it. That he would contain it within himself if necessary, study it, master it, and never return it to beings who'd already proven they'd destroy existence itself to maintain their power. Cryos laughed again, that terrible, broken sound. My son sealed his mother's fate with those words. The moment he admitted he'd stolen their weapon and would never give it back, that was it. They couldn't kill him while Andra lived, so... The Origin's voice cracked. So they made an example. They wanted Anki to watch. They dragged Andra before their council and they unmade her. Not killed, unmade. They pulled her essence apart piece by piece while my son was held in place by the Origin of the Sun's binding. They made him watch his mother dissolve into nothing while she screamed his name. Northern felt his blood run cold. The last thing Andra said was, I forgive you. Cryos's shoulders shook. She forgave him, even as she died because of his arrogance, his self-righteousness, his absolute certainty that he knew better than everyone else. She forgave him. That's when I understood what my son really was. Not a savior. Not even a villain. Just a fool who thought the universe would bend to his will because his intentions were good. He gambled with his mother's life and lost. And somehow, he still believed he was right. Cryos looked directly at Northern, and for the first time, there was something other than madness in his eyes. Something that might have been grief or rage or both twisted together. So yes, I killed him. I devoured him. I took his power and his knowledge because someone had to actually do something instead of playing researcher while the world burned. Anki wanted to save the corrupted Void, save the Origins, save everyone. I just want to burn it all down and make them feel what I felt when I watched Andra die. The Origin's voice became quiet, almost gentle. My wife died calling out for our son. The first Origins murdered her to get to him. And he knew they would. He knew, and he went anyway because he thought he was clever enough to talk his way out. That's what I can't forgive. Northern stood in silence, processing the weight of what he'd just heard. Finally, he spoke. So the Chaos Prince knew his mother would die if he confronted the first Origins. He went anyway, and now you're trying to destroy the entire feeding system to avenge her. Yes, even though destroying the system means killing everyone in the mortal world. Including your son, who's apparently alive again somehow. Cryos's smile was sharp and broken. Oh, Anki's been alive in various forms for a while now. That's what happens when you fragment your consciousness across 10 Plague Kings as insurance. My son planned for betrayal from everyone except his own arrogance. The Origin's eyes glinted with something dangerous. And yes, I'll kill him again if necessary. This time, I'll make sure there's nothing left to regenerate. Northern fell silent after Cryos's last words. He knew there was more, there had to be more to this cosmology. Right now, he still felt like there was more, so much more to what Cryos was telling him. But what Cryos had just spilled now had been the closest he'd ever gotten to the truth. At the same time, after being subjected to lies and manipulation over and over again, Northern had become too cynical not to take Cryos' words with a grain of salt. Yet he wasn't stupid enough to dismiss everything the Origin was saying. If Cryos had deliberately entered the prison because it was the only way to slip into the feeding field that the first Origins had created, which sadly was his own world, Northern looked at him with quiet disbelief. How come it took a superior being like you such drastic measures to enter this world, when elves and other beings from the underworld just slip through somehow? Cryos chuckled dryly. What would long-eared dolls do to the authority of the Origins, let alone the firsts themselves? Northern looked down for a moment. That makes sense. He was boiling with hundreds, no thousands, of questions. There was so much he wanted to know that he was beginning to think of undoing the erasure touch. But the moment he did that, Cryos would break free, and worse, he could try to run away. This was the only way, but like this, his questions were limited. He didn't know if Cryos was capable of dying from erasure touch. He doubted it. But the Origin might not be in any position to answer his questions anymore. Even right now, the mark had spread over the right side of his body and was beginning to creep toward his left. Northern exhaled and asked the question that had been building up inside him. What happens to the first Origins if you succeed? If you destroy their feeding system? Cryos responded with a strain, his voice losing its texture. They starve. Then we watch what happens when they starve, what will crumble if they don't get the essence feed that motivated them to build an entire civilization. Or maybe they'll be forced to emerge from hiding while still wounded, and in that state. Cryos grinned viciously, silver blood streaming between his teeth. In that state, I'm going to enjoy destroying them or die trying. The implication hung in the air between them. Northern looked at the spreading corruption on Cryos' body, then back at the Origin's face. He thought about the fact that the Void was corrupted and something was happening. Granted, he had wielded the Void before and had never felt like it was corrupted in any way. There's something you're not telling me about the corrupted Void. What exactly does this corruption mean, and what happens when the system falls? Cryos' expression became unreadable. Very perceptive. Yes, there's more. But that knowledge... He paused. That knowledge is what the first Origins killed Andra to protect. What Anki died trying to prove. What I'm willing to let consume me to reveal. Tell me. Cryos shook his head. No. Northern suppressed the urge to slap him again. Not everything needed to be resolved through violence. Instead, he gave Cryos a calm look. What would it take for you to tell me? Cryos raised his head, looking at Northern sternly. What are you? Northern went blank for a moment, just blinking. Then he suddenly laughed. His laugh made Cryos frown darkly. Well, must have been shocking, right? I can understand, I guess. But who am I? I'm just a boy who wants to protect his life and his parents. His gaze sharpened. It so happens that we're all livestock to the first Origins, but in this livestock field, I have people I want to protect, a life I want to protect too. Cryos shook his head in disappointment. This is why it's never logical to reason with humans. Bound by finite emotions, sentimental toward bonds that won't matter. What you call pride is what sustains my sense of worth. You humans have none of it. You'll live shackled because of flimsy excuses like bonds and sentimentalism. They're all finite. If you're a nomad by nature and you reach a new settlement, will you not meet new people? New bonds? After making them, will you refuse to follow your nomadic nature because of the bonds you've made, because of pointless sentiments? Northern gave him a hand chop on his forehead, like a father scolding a child. This is different. Some bonds are irreplaceable. For a moment, Northern paused and internally examined himself. I can't believe I'm the one saying this right now. Northern thought back to what Roma had said, that fighting for people doesn't make you any less weak. Power without direction is weakness. Although he wasn't conclusive about the latter, he loved to believe power is power, even in its directionlessness. He brought his attention back to Cryos. You're hypocritical, do you know that? You didn't mind staying 7,000 years in a prison just to get here. You're willing to burn my entire world to the ground just to avenge someone you love. And yet you call me sentimental for trying to protect my world? Remove the log of dirt from your own eye. Cryos's voice sharpened. This is more than just sentiments. He coughed immediately after, his voice sounding hoarse. They've exploited the world. They created a civilization solely for the purpose of their own replenishment, after fighting a war that was purely hinged on their own pride, dragging their mother into it, and now the entirety of the realm, both greater and lesser fragments, stands at the risk of corruption, and they'll do nothing about it. This is righting the wrongs of the world. Not only am I avenging them, my vengeance will destroy both fragments of the world and leave them with nothing. This is how to right the wrongs they've committed. Northern looked at the Origin with a mixture of disbelief for a few seconds. You are mad. Revan's shirt hung in tatters, dark crimson blooming across the white fabric like twisted flowers. Blood traced lines down his face from a gash above his eyebrow, and his breathing came in ragged bursts that misted in the frigid air. His left arm dangled at an unnatural angle, dislocated, perhaps broken. Yet his grin remained. It was wrong, that grin. Manic, like a man who'd discovered the punchline to a cosmic joke no one else could hear. Call stood 20 meters away, his pale skin marred by dozens of shallow cuts, paper-thin lines that wept droplets of blood like morning dew. Superficial wounds, really. Nothing that would slow him down. Nothing that mattered. He tilted his head, studying the broken man before him. Why are you still standing? Revan's laugh came out wet, bubbling. He spat blood onto the ice. Rents due. Call's eyes narrowed. What? I said. Revant lurched forward, his mangled arm swinging uselessly at his side. Rents due, and I'll be damned if I let some reflection-spamming cockroach keep me from making quota. The speed was impossible. A man that wounded shouldn't move like that. Shouldn't blur across the distance like smoke caught in a gale. Yet Revant closed the gap in a heartbeat, his right hand driving toward Call's chest like a piston. Call dissolved into shadow and rematerialized behind him. You're bleeding out. Accept defeat gracefully. Revant's head didn't turn. His entire body did, bones cracking and restructuring as his back became his front. His face flowing across his skull like wax. The dislocated arm snapped back into place with a sickening pop that echoed across the frozen wasteland. Graceful? Do I look graceful to you? He was on Call again, his movements no longer fluid but jagged, desperate. A dying animal that refused to acknowledge the concept of death. His bare left hand shot forward, the mouth in his palm yawning wide. Call flickered backward, and obsidian chains erupted from the ice, lashing toward Revant's legs. The broken tyrant didn't dodge. He simply let them wrap around his calves, let them dig into his flesh and draw fresh blood. The chains tightened, trying to anchor him in place. Revant looked down at them with theatrical disappointment. Really? Chains again? How pedestrian. Then he smiled, that awful, blood-stained smile. But I appreciate the commitment to aesthetic consistency. The chains suddenly went slack. Not broken, consumed. The mouth in Revant's palm had somehow extended its reach, invisible jaws crunching through the links without him even touching them. Call's expression finally cracked. How are you? Still keeping up? Revant finished, taking a shambling step forward. His right leg buckled slightly, internal damage, probably. You want to know the secret? Another step. Blood dripped from his fingertips, pattering onto the frozen ground like rain. From the day I opened my eyes, I've been poor, and I've always had to depend on him. You know what poverty teaches you? His grin widened impossibly. How to stretch a single copper coin across an entire week. How to make nothing into something. How to keep going when every logical bone in your body screams that you should just lie down and die. He was close now. Close enough that Call could see the wild gleam in those blue eyes. Not the calculating gaze of a warrior, but the fevered determination of a man who'd learned long ago that surrender was more expensive than bleeding. You think these wounds slow me down? Revant's laugh was hysterical now, unhinged. I've worked 3 jobs simultaneously while suffering from pneumonia. I fought monsters while starving on that frozen mountain. You think a few cuts and a dislocated arm are gonna stop me from collecting your organs? Khal unleashed a barrage of black swords. They came from every angle, above, below, from the sides, a geometric nightmare designed to give no quarter. Revant didn't try to dodge them all. He couldn't. Instead, he wove through the gaps with manic precision, taking blades through his shoulder, his thigh, his side, anywhere non-vital. Each impact drew blood. Each wound should have been debilitating. But he kept coming. You want to know the real difference between us? Revant's voice had gone quiet now, almost gentle, as he closed the final distance between them. Blood poured from a dozen new wounds, painting him crimson from head to toe. Khal tried to phase backward again, but this time Revant's bare hand caught his wrist. The tyrant of reflection froze, feeling the crushing grip, feeling the wrongness of it. This shouldn't be possible. A man this wounded shouldn't have this kind of strength. Revant leaned in close, his breath hot against Khal's ear. You're fighting for some grand purpose. World domination, chaos, whatever. His fingers tightened, and Khal felt bones begin to creak. But me? I'm fighting for money to rent a damn house and be independent. His other hand, the gloved one, shot forward and plunged into Khal's chest. And there is nothing. Another organ torn free. Nothing. Another bloody harvest. More terrifying than a broke man with bills to pay. Khal finally screamed. Revant stood there, painted in blood both his own and his enemies', organs dripping from his hands. His body a roadmap of wounds that should have killed him 3 times over. And he was still grinning. Now then, shall we continue? Revant's lunging hand suddenly froze moments before piercing into Khal's chest. He frowned darkly and looked behind over his shoulder. About 5 enormous black spears were hurtling through the air from above with terrible speed. He grimaced, released Khal, and jumped away to dodge the spears. He watched the ominous things as they dissolved into the air. That's fair. Never really liked it to begin with. He looked up. Khal did the same, searching for whoever had interrupted their battle, or, in this case, saved him. The being had large wings spread across the sky, hovering directly above and looking down at them. Khal narrowed his eyes as he recognized who it was. I'm not surprised, but what I am surprised about is how you have the void. The Chaos Prince slowly descended to Khal's front. His face was cold and emotionless. Khal, my friend, you have that thing with you, don't you? Khal hesitated. What about it? Chaos Prince smiled. The smile was harmless, then again it was evil. A level of madness too incomprehensible to grasp. The kind that could draw in a little girl for warmth and stab her viciously while still smiling. You want his origination. All I want is my soul back. Things are beginning to get rather irritating. Khal looked over to Revant, who was slowly moving toward them despite his terrible state. Oh, that one? Chaos Prince pointed a finger toward Revant. Let me deal with him. Something shot out of his finger, blurred, and carved a large hole into Revant's chest. The tyrant stopped moving at that moment, trembling uncontrollably as blood dripped from the hole in his chest and his mouth. He grinned, blood staining every tooth. You bastard! Then he collapsed.